we get started with today's video, just a little note, there is a giveaway with Balessa. This little timestamp on the screen, so if you want to win something, and everyone does, everyone wins something, you can just click the link in the description down below, or skip directly to this timestamp to learn more about Balessa. I know some of you were probably starting to doubt that this day was ever going to come. Hello, and welcome to the second installment in my new little series where I read every single book that TikTok recommends to me. It is going well. In the first episode, we recapped the Twisted series by Anna Huang, which it was certainly something, to say the least. From memory, which I'm now realizing was not a good idea because it was somehow even more unhinged than I remembered it being. So for this video, not from memory, we've been rereading. There are quotes, there's little details, little plot points that I picked up on a second read. You're getting all the tea. We've had a bit of a rework since I posted that first video because I think I significantly underestimated how much there was to recap in some of these books, namely the Akatar series by Sarah J. Maas. I said that the next video would cover the Empyrean series, which is this series right here, and I kind of lied. One, because I made it seem like that video was going to come out the next week. It's been 3 months. Sorry about that. That is my bad. And also because once we started doing the script for Fourth Wing, we realized very quickly that this video would be 6 hours long if we also recapped Iron Flame, and I don't think anyone's gonna watch that. We've split them up into little groups. So in today's little installment, we've got just Fourth Wing and then Iron Flame in the next. And then for the Akatar series, I'm gonna break them up by book 1, book 2 as one video, book 3, 4, and 5 as one video, I think. I'm not 100% sure, we'll have to see, because the script is not done for 2 of those books still. If you've got any suggestions on how I should break them up, please let me know. And then after I finish the Akatar series, we're going to move on to the Heavenly Body series, and then we'll be theoretically done, unless you guys enjoy these recaps, and then I can just keep going forever, apparently. But as you can see from my outfit today, we are covering Fourth Wing. Graduate or die. Given Harry Potter, but with dragons. Just like with the last video, I'm gonna go over a bit of background about romantasy as a genre because this is the first book in this little series that actually touches into romantasy, as the Twisted series is contemporary romance. And then I'm gonna do a little background on the author, Rebecca Yarros, as an individual, her previous work, how that ties in to Fourth Wing. And then we're gonna get into the recap, the good bit, the juicy sauce. I would really love it, live, laugh, love it, if you will, if you wouldn't mind engaging with this video. My last few videos got demonetized and severely harmed their reach. Engaging with this video, liking it if you liked it. I mean, you might hate it, in which case I guess not. Leaving a comment, maybe. Even maybe sharing it with your friend, your family. TikTok, share it to TikTok. It worked for Rebecca Yarros, so why can't it work for me? Only the funny parts though. Cut out the boring bit. There might be like 1 or 2 occasions in this 3-hour-long video, or however long this has ended up being. But just put those ones on TikTok. Yeah, so that they're fake advertised that I'm a lot funnier than I am. Thank you so much. I am dressed as Violet Sorrengail, famous book girly and faller offer of dragons. Oh, my hip clicked. Did you hear that? I am a senior citizen. If you don't know, this is what the main character in this book looks like. She's got silver hair at the ends, and she dresses like a yummy mummy, to be honest, because I'm wearing Lululemon, so she dresses like she's got young kids and lots of money, so good for her. Good for her. This book was my first little toe dip into the genre of romantasy, which seems to make up the majority of books that are trending on BookTok, at least within the last 6 months or so. I am going to have to take this off before we get going because I am overheating. I'm sweating so much. Don't know how the Dragon Riders do it, man. According to an article by Ella Creamer, Bloomsbury have kind of claimed that they coined the term in order to label the genre that Sarah J. Maas was spearheading with her Throne of Glass series. Contrary to that, the term actually appeared in the Urban Dictionary as early as 2006, so somebody's telling a fib. A little lie there. Romantasy combines romance and fantasy into one neat little genre, but I think a lot of people who read romantasy would still consider romantasy to be predominantly fantasy-based as opposed to romance-based, because a lot of the books tend to have the romance as subplots as opposed to main plots, which is where they differ from romance books, which tend to have the romance as the primary interest and kind of things that happened in the subplot to kind of move the romance along and help their relationship progress. It's kind of flipped in romantasy, or at least it is for the most part. I don't know how much I agree with that with this book, because the romance is very central. World building, not so much. There are questions I have, Rebecca. I have questions. Another reason why I think a lot of romantasy readers also refer to the books that they read as fantasy books predominantly is because they experience the same type of intellectualized snobbery that romance readers often do, which is people seem to think that they're dumb and ditzy for wanting to read books that have romance in, because they're not, the hard-hitting classic books. I'm going to blame the patriarchy for this, because despite the fact that women make up the primary consumers of almost every single genre of book, like, I'm not joking, studies in the US, Canada, and the UK have shown that men make up only 20% of the fiction book market. 20%. And yet, why am I ashamed? Why am I being called stupid? Girlies will be bullied for wanting to read books about, romance and dragons. Sir, I'm not even sure most of your kind can read, according to the statistics. So I feel like you should be worrying about your own house, because the boys are not reading, sir. And for the record, Jane Austen would have loved ACOTAR, because it's basically a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't give women an education. Let the girls learn to read. Got a little bit sidetracked there. Anyway, the sci-fi and romantasy genre has grown significantly in the last few years. From 2018 to 2023, there was a 93% increase in sales within that genre. And as I just explained, this massive growth is predominantly fueled by female readers. There are also factors like the rise of popularity of shows like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, Dune, Slay, Hunger Games, even Twilight, kind of iconic. But it could also be because of the pandemic. Throwback. Who remembers that old chestnut? There was this massive need over the period of lockdowns for people to have this sense of escapism, and there was a need for female strength and identity that could be found within these types of books. Romantasy books often have a reclamation of female and queer desires as written by predominantly female and queer authors for predominantly female and queer audiences. These stories are plot-driven and centre around impressive, strong, complex, in many cases, female characters. Well, until Iron Flame, but we can get into that in the next video. But these books are fast-paced and compulsive reads. I and many other girlies on the internet cannot get enough. We also can't ignore the fact that BookTok has opened the door for these romantasy authors like Rebecca Yarros to gain these incredibly large fandoms, like astronomically large, who are so dedicated that they will genuinely read page by page over and over again to try and find some hint at a plot point that they might have missed. These people are genuinely ride or die supporters of these books and their characters, which coincidentally is kind of like the motto of this book. It's genuinely ride a dragon or die. Those are your two only options. If we're talking romantasy, the number one author in this genre is Sarah J. Maas, whose global sales are over 40 million. She has spent over 92 weeks in the top 100 New York Times bestseller list for one or more of her many books. For comparison, Harry Potter is the best-selling children's fantasy series of all time, which will come as a shock to genuinely no one, and that has sold over 600 million copies worldwide. Miss Sarah's getting there. Miss Sarah's getting there. Also, for all of you fantasy fans and romantasy fans, please forgive me. I know there are so many incredible authors in this genre who are not Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, but I kind of have to talk about them when we're talking about the most popular ones. Like, physically and legally cannot ignore them. They're there. They're very present. I will be talking about a lesser known author within this genre later on in the series. I think Heavenly Bodies was her debut book series, I think. So we will be shining some light on some new blood within the genre then. But for now, we are sticking with the big guns. And the underdog of the two big guns is actually Rebecca Yarros. Her book sales soared with the release of Fourth Wing and continued with Iron Flame, the latter of which became Waterstone's highest selling pre-order title in a single day, 4 months before its expected release date. That's ridiculous. Readers who would typically avoid fantasy or sci-fi books are finding themselves reading this book. And I think it's because it's a little bit like fantasy light. The world building and the characters and the concepts within it are not particularly hard to understand, and they're very adjacent to very popular works that came before it, like, for example, things in Harry Potter or the Divergent series. They make reappearances in this book in different shapes and forms, so it's a very digestible read, and it's a very good one to dip your toe into the world of fantasy. Unfortunately, once you dip a toe in, the pond does consume you. No, there's no coming back from that, I fear. That's it. That is your life now, and you'll very, very quickly find yourself 15 books deep in Sarah J. Maas. Poppy War. You're stuck there. You're never coming out. And I hate to say it, but real life will never compare. Now, whilst Fourth Wing was Rebecca Yarros' first fantasy book, Miss Becky has been writing. She has. It's not her first rodeo. It's just her first rodeo with dragons. Before that, she wrote predominantly military romances, which makes sense given that the military structure of this book is quite integral to it. Let's learn a little bit more about Miss Becky. Off Rebecca Yarros' website, she's a hopeless romantic who adores all things chocolate, coffee, and paleo. Is in the paleo diet? I feel like that's a bit an odd one to put as like things that you adore. I adore the paleo diet. That's questionable. Anyway, I'm not trying to yuck on your yum, babe. You enjoy what you want to enjoy. Surely there's different, do you like dogs? Like, I feel like that would have been a more appropriate thing to put there rather than just the paleo diet. She then follows that up with, no, seriously, I need to have a caffeine IV put in. It's giving millennial. Love that for her. I also live, laugh, love coffee. Rebecca Yarros is a military wife with 6 children. She's booked and busy. Yes, she is. Plays guitar. She watches her 4 sons, 4, play hockey, and John Hughes, who I think is her husband, marathons with the 2 daughters. Her and her husband adopted their youngest daughter and also run a non-profit to help other parents adopt, which is quite nice. We love that. The non-profit is called 1 October, if you're interested in learning more about that. She is also a die-hard Mets fan, and her heart calls Colorado home, which you might think is an irrelevant detail, but when I tell you that this is for context, it truly is, okay? Because let's just do a recap of her other novels that she has written before Fourth Wing. She has 6 standalone books that were all released between 2018 and 2023, as well as the Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. My girl just doesn't stop writing. And I'll be honest, it shows with Iron Flame. Should have taken a few more months with that one. I'm going to be so transparent. But who am I to speak? I'm not a published author, so I can't speak on that. But The Last Letter, which is about a soldier whose best friend dies and then he has to go and take care of his little sister, and what surprise, they get it on. Great and Precious Things, which is a love story about a soldier from Colorado. Muse and Melodies, which is an enemies to lovers rockstar romance. He is in a band. She then has a book called A Little Too Close. A Little Too Close was written in 2022, and it's about a single mother romance in Colorado with a growly pilot who is only home to start his family's new heli skiing operation. Yeah, I did not make that up. The Things We Leave Unfinished is another book. This is a romance between a journalist and a writer. He's a best-selling author of Million. They end up falling in love and writing a book together about a soldier in World War II. It's not my kind of date, but sure. In the Likely Event, which came out in 2023, is a plane crash love story where she's a politician and he's say it with me, you guessed it, a soldier. Yeah, he is. Then the last one is actually a book series that ran from 2016 to 2022 called Legacy. It's a 3-book series, and these covers are, I cannot express to you enough, seriously giving contemporary romance. It follows wildfires that destroy a small town in where? Oh, Colorado. Oh yeah, okay. And there are hero firefighters, and then there's a fostering child storyline in there as well. Very topical. And then you get this incredible little quote, "One look and I'm breathless. One touch and he's relentless. And if I'm not careful, he'll burn me to the ground again." Which, I'll be honest, is not giving hero firefighter, it's giving arsonist. repeat offender. She also has a series called Flight and Glory, which is 6 books released between 2014 and 2016, which is kind of giving like Twisted series, I'll be honest. They all are focused on military men romances again. One of the books is actually about a girl whose father dies in Afghanistan and her hockey star neighbor holds her together with his big arms, I guess. And then Renegades is another book series that she had that released between 2016 and 2017, which was 3 books, also romance, about bad boys. Yeah, he's Paxton Wilder, 22-year-old, tattooed, smoking hot leader of the Renegades. 5-time X Games medalist. The world is his playground. You get the vibes. She then did the In Love duet, which is 2 books that came out in 2021, Girl in Love and Boy in Love, which is spelled L-U-V, which I can't help but think is just like an ode to BTS. Don't know if there's any ARMY in the chat, but back in the day, the Boy in Love, that was an era, okay? The synopsis for that one is, she's looking for a date to the wedding from hell. It isn't every day you're forced to be in the bridal party whilst your first love marries your arch nemesis. She needs to find a date who's not afraid of her family's money. Someone willing to shake things up. Spoiler, the date she ends up bringing is a bad boy soldier. Of course he is. I would love to unpack this and what this means, but I quite frankly do not have time, and it's not what we're here for. But yeah, she writes very much about what she knows, which is Colorado, helicopters and flying, and soldiers, which makes a lot of sense when you learn that this book is about a military college with dragon riders, because dragons famously fly. And so a dragon rider is essentially just a pilot. It's not set in Colorado as far as I'm aware, but to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised. Anything's possible with enough weed. But all of this is to say, it makes her transition to fantasy a little bit more interesting, because she has been writing the same type of book for a very long time, so you wouldn't expect her sudden pivot to do as well as it has. She did an interview where she addressed her shifting of kind of genre, and she essentially said that her publisher said that they were starting a fantasy line. She, as in Rebecca Yarros, pitched 6 ideas, and then the publisher picked up the one with the dragons. And the rest is history. I mean, to be fair, wouldn't you? I'd pick up the one with the dragons too. She does say that she is a huge fantasy fan and that the first book she actually wrote was a fantasy book, but it didn't get picked up. So then she kind of pivoted more towards hot soldiers from Colorado, or just in Colorado, to start their family's helicopter business. Yes, that was it. She loves a military romance, and that is very prevalent within this series, and I think this is why she has managed to make the shift work, because by centering the dynamic of the book on this kind of military-esque romance, she is kind of just copy and pasting the same thing she's been doing for a very long time. And it shows, because unlike most of the other fantasy books or romantasy books that I've read that are very predominantly fantasy first and then romance as a subplot, this book is very much feeling like the romance was the plot and the rest of it was kind of built up around that, because the world building in here is a little lackluster. I will be honest, I'm sorry. But I think this is why the dynamic between the 2 main characters, which we'll get into in a minute on the board behind me, I like to think that she wanted to make her male characters go in a direction that doesn't really work with contemporary romance. We talked about it a bit with the Twisted series, which is that when you have a contemporary romance book, a lot of the characters, when you have like a bad boy, you can't really let them get away with the same things that you can for a man in a romantasy book, which, I mean, the men in a lot of contemporary books do just end up giving criminal. They just start doing murderous, stalky things, which when in a contemporary climate and a contemporary world setting within the book, a little bit scary. It is, yes. When we're talking about dragons though, world with dragons, you can kind of get away with saying things like, look at her again and I'll kill you. I'm like, yeah, kill him because he looked at her. I am a bit more pro-murder, I hate to say it. I did giggle many a time in this book. You say that in a contemporary romance novel, jail. So I think the romantasy genre has kind of set Yarros free a bit to experiment a bit more with her bad side of her bad boys. But it is interesting that this book is set in a war college and the riders are kind of similar to pilots. So yeah, she has kind of just copied and pasted that in. Interestingly, she did ask her husband about the kind of choreography for dragons, and her husband had to remind her that dragons are not helicopters. Which genuinely might be the funniest thing I've ever heard. If you have read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame and you are looking for some more recommendations within the romantasy genre, I am going to put a few on screen now. They are tried, tested favourites of the community, mainly because my experience with romantasy is once you read one, you very quickly snowball into reading a lot. Probably going to exhaust all the Sarah J. Maas books you can find, and maybe you want something else. So there are a couple on screen now, and when I say a couple, I mean a lot. There are a lot of books on screen now. If you would like to read some books that are actually really good. Personal faves of mine from this list are The Song of Achilles, The Poppy War, and Of Stones and Wildflowers. I might not be able to give you a dragon, but I can give you the second best thing in this book, Cheerios. Balessa and I are partnering up to send every single person that enters the giveaway, linked in the description down below, a free toy or gift card. Wow. Then all you gotta do is sign up using the link down below. Balessa are a bi-woman sexual wellness brand who are on a mission to empower everybody in every body to embrace, explore, and celebrate their sexuality. This includes creating products like the Demi Wand, which focuses on making that big O accessible to all bodies and body types, as it's specifically designed to help more people feel comfortable using a toy. Last time I worked with Balessa, they were my own personal Father Christmas because they sent me a lot of toys. Each toy has their very own little USB charging case, which not only keeps the dust off the goods, but it also means that everything's all wrapped up very discreet. This just looks like a little compact mirror. No one would really know what was going on here unless they knew. In which case, oi oi. This is the Air Vibe. It has dual stimulation, is waterproof, which as I said before, is great for the wet and wild girlies. You know? Who doesn't love a shower? And unlike the dragons in this book, this is silent. But if, like Violet, you're an overachiever, you might want the Air Vibe Pro instead. But you're thinking, Eleanor, all those features in the Air Vibe sound incredible. Why might I need the Pro? Let me tell you, babe, it's got a remote. Yeah, it does. Moving on, we've got the Pebble. She's pretty, she's pink. One for the aesthetic girlies. Pop this in your IG dump. She's ergonomically built to fit in the palm of your hand. She's got suction and vibration controlled independently. Plus, there's no annoying pattern modes, which means you can cruise at exactly the altitude you want to. And as I mentioned, because I am nothing if not a girl's girl, Balessa and I are sending out free toys and gift cards to every single person that enters the giveaway link down below. Thank you so much to Balessa for sponsoring this part of today's video. By clicking the link down below, you're helping to support my channel, which allows me the freedom to be able to make 4-hour-long book recaps. So please do click the link. Please do check out Balessa. Right, now back to Colorado. Congratulations, you made it through all of that, and we're now finally getting into the book recap. No one can say I wasn't thorough with this one, okay? Some people said I wasn't thorough enough in the last one. Can't catch me slipping now. You're getting all the information, whether you like it or not. Your brain's gonna be massive. This book has almost 1.5 million ratings on Goodreads, with a total Goodreads score of 4.59, which is incredibly high considering how many ratings there are. There are over 200,000 reviews for this book on Goodreads. The girlies, they had things to say about this book. As with the previous video, I am going to be attempting an American accent for all of the quotes that I read from this book. I'll be honest, you guys gave me far too many compliments on my accent on the last video. Way too many. I now believe that I can do a somewhat decent American accent, and that's all your fault. So if you don't like it, this is a plague you brought upon yourself. The tagline for this book, which is a TikTok sound, and it is everywhere. A dragon without their rider is a tragedy. A rider without their dragon is dead. This is kind of foreshadowing. It is kind of important lore, so try and remember that. Points for the front cover on this one. I do really love the design of this book. It's a rare win. A rare win for book covers within this genre. I am going to give you the summary of the book now, just for context, but I will break it down a little bit. 20-year-old Violet Sorrengail was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant, living a quiet life amongst books and history. Now, the commanding general, also known as her toughest Talon's mother, has ordered Violet to join the hundreds of candidates striving to become the elite of Navarre, dragon riders. But when you're smaller than everyone else and your body is brittle, death is only a heartbeat away, because dragons don't bond to fragile humans, they incinerate them. With fewer dragons willing to bond than candidates, most would kill Violet to better their own chances of success. The rest would kill her just for being her mother's daughter, like Xaden Ryerson, the most powerful and ruthless wing leader in the Riders Quadrant. Which, by the way, we will get into why this man having that position is quite honestly the dumbest thing I could ever imagine, given who he is within the context of this story. Who gave this man a position of power? I'm holding my tongue. She'll need every edge her wits can give her just to see the next sunrise. Yet, with every day that passes, the war outside grows more deadly. The kingdom's protective wards are failing, and the death toll continues to rise. Even worse, Violet begins to suspect that leadership is hiding a terrible secret. Friends, enemies, lovers. Everyone at Basquiat War College has an agenda, because once you enter, there are only two ways out. Graduate or die. Dun, dun, dun! That's right. So War College. It's given Harry Potter, except with a lot, well, not with a lot more deaths. Lots of people die in Harry Potter. So our female main character and potential narrator of this series, I'll get into why potential in a little bit, is 20-year-old Violet I Will Not Die Today Sorringale. And she is our silver-haired, physically impaired girl boss. Is she a little bit slay? Case in point, Your Honor, the outfit is giving. Do I use the term physically impaired loosely? I absolutely do. Essentially, she's very small and very weak and fragile because girl who like books cannot possibly also like exercise. It's mentioned a horrifically repetitive amount how itty bitty ooh our protagonist is here. She's a very, very small woman, child size, you know, she's bite size, she's cutesy. I'm going to go into more detail about her physical impairment in a little bit because actually it does have some relevancy, but for the most part it is used just to kind of show how itty bitty and tiny and baby she is and how she's just so little. That's mostly what it's used for as a plot point. It drives my it does me head in. It does. It truly does. So Fourth Wing is set in a fantasy world where we are in the country of Navarre, which protects its borders with an elite army of dragon riders. Similar to the Divergent series, where you have to get sorted into factions when you get to be college age, the college age kids of Navarre are sorted into 4 quadrants. Now, these 4 quadrants are scribes, riders, healers, and infantry. We're pretty much only focusing on the riders and a little bit of the scribes in this book, but we are kind of told that the infantry are just like, they're just big meatheads, essentially, and the healers heal people, so that's about it. I'm now going to introduce you to the board. Congratulations! We're almost at the part where I do the thing that I said I was going to do in the title, which is actually recap this book. Unfortunately, I now have to explain how this board works. Please hang in there, babe. You're so close. I made some changes from my Twisted video as to how this board works because I read the comments and some of you made some very valid points. The most valid being that I should have color coordinated the pins to show groups of people together. Like to group them. And I thought that that was actually a really great idea. So I'm just going to run through what each of the colors of pins mean so that you know anytime anyone on this board has one or more of that color of pin, they belong to that group. And if they have lots of different colors of pins, it's because they belong to multiple groups all at once. For example, anyone with one or more white pin is blood related to our protagonist, Violet. Violet Sorringale, main character. She is the daughter of General Lilith Sorringale and her late scribe husband. Very dead. Very dead. She also has 2 older siblings called Mira and Brennan. Brennan is also deceased. No longer with us, dearly departed. So those are blood related. Anyone with one or more black pin represents a position of authority within the army. So Violet's mum is a general, so she has 2 black pins and 2 white pins because she's also Violet's mum. Colonel Atos also has black pins because he's a colonel. He is Dane's father. As well as using the black pins to show authority, I've also kind of visually shown it on the board. If you ignore Violet's dad and Brennan, who aren't really relevant because they're dead, sorry, not to hate on the deceased, but irrelevant. Violet's mum is a general in the army, and Colonel Atos is also up there in terms of authority, so they're at the top of the map. Mira has graduated Basquiat War College, so she is a functioning member of the army, and she is very girl boss, very slay. The people live, laugh, love Mira. She has a position of authority outside of the army. I haven't shown her authority with a black pin. I probably should, but I visually represented it here by putting her above Violet and Xaden. Violet's only in the middle because she's the main character. She has no power here. I mean, genuinely, none. Everyone's surprised she's still breathing by chapter 2. Ignore her, she has no power. Next up in terms of power is Xaden, who is the wing leader of the 4th wing, so he's higher up. Then you have Dane and Garrick. I can't remember whether Garrick has an official role of responsibility, but he's kind of treated as Xaden's number 2, like second in command. So I put him on par with Dane, who has an official leader role within the wing, which is what his black pin is for, but I can't quite remember whether Garrick's is official or not. I think it is. But I haven't given him a black pin because I'm not 100% sure and I don't want the girlies to come for me. But anyway, Dane is a 2nd year, they are 3rd years, so he is less important. That's just how that works. Everyone else underneath here is in the squad, but they don't have positions of power. They're just like regular members. Anyone with a red pin means child of a rebel and has a rebellion relic tattoo. Essentially, they are branded as children of traitors. As you can see, Xaden's got one, Bodhi's got one, his name got cut off. Sorry, this is Bodhi. Liam's got one, Imogen's got one, Garrick's got one. These are our children of traitors. Blue means scribes, which was that other quadrant that you barely hear about that Violet was supposed to join, which is why she's so nerdy. She's a little nerd. The only scribe that we get to know throughout the entirety of the book, really, by name, is Jezenia? So she has blue pins. Violet's dad was also a scribe, but he's dead, but he does have one blue pin. I think that's everyone. I think I need to give Mira a black pin just so it shows that she's got some power, because I don't want the girls thinking she doesn't have any power, because she really does. There you go. Beautiful. Then we've got the dragons. Dragons have green, just because I think dragons like being outside in nature. These are dragons. There are a lot more dragons than just these 3, but these are kind of the 3 main dragons, and they're the only dragons we hear from, because yes, the dragons do talk, but we'll get into that later. I'm not going to give you any spoilers about whose dragons they are, but I'm sure you can work it out. Now that's what the pins mean. Now the red string just shows connections between characters. This can be blood related if it's not shown through the pins, but it can also be through kind of like plotting, or maybe they just know each other. The only 2 types of connections there are: malevolent scheming and just acquaintance. Those are the only 2 types of relationships you can have. The only characters currently that are connected are Violet to her family and Dane to his father, Colonel Atos, because, spoiler, they're Nepo babies. But I am going to add another string in between Colonel Atos and General Sorengale, because they know each other, they're long-term besties, they brought down a rebellion together, and that is a hell of a bonding activity. So I'm going to put that on here. Lovely. See? And now they know each other. Work colleagues. So that's the board. What do we know about Violet right off the bat when we open this book? We find out that due to a fever that Violet's mum had during her pregnancy, Violet was born with a rare condition that causes the ends of her hair to turn like a silvery grey, and her ligaments and joints subluxate frequently. Which seems very random, but Yarros later confirmed that Violet has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which isn't made particularly clear in the books at all. I think a lot of people reading it didn't even realise that she had a disability, and so they weren't really aware that it was disability representation through her weakness. It's kind of played out as in she should just train harder and then she'll be less breakable, which now you know she has an actual disability reads like train harder and then maybe you won't be disabled, which is a crazy thing to say. Anyway, she gets broken a lot. Like, there's lots of things. She's constantly hurt throughout this book. We learn very quickly that our girl Violet originally trained to join the scribe quadrant because she's, again, described as a very meek and mild girl. She's not really built to be a fighter. She has a big brain instead. Massive brain. She knows all of the things. That's something you need to know about Violet. Because she has read so many books, she knows everything about everything until it's relevant for the plot that she doesn't know it. And then they have to go on a mission to find it. Weird how that the one thing she doesn't know is the one thing that's integral to the plot. But anyway, she's top of her class. She was trained to be a scribe, born and bred. But at the very last minute, her mum is like, yeah, no, you thought. Surprise, you're actually entering into the Riders quadrant where you're probably going to be killed before graduation. Mother of the Year, everyone. Round of applause for Mother of the Year. It's giving Dauntless, it's giving Hunger Games. And I think that is why this book is so digestible, because these are concepts we already know and love. But yeah, everyone say thank you, Mum, because without this woman's sociopathic nature, we would not have a story. We would just have Violet reading books for the entirety of the book, which is very boring. Sorry, but I want to see some dragons. I mean, given that there are 2 books, we do obviously know that Violet is not going to die in book 1. Spoiler, hate to say it. Clearly she survives being a dragon rider thus far. So that's what we learn pretty much in the first chapter. Violet wanted to be a little nerd, and instead her mother said, no, you will actually be partaking in a speed run towards death at Basgiath War College. Thoughts on Basgiath War College, by the way? What is your liability waiver like? That's what I want to know. Why are you so keen to murder all of your students? I understand the poetry of it, like survival of the fittest, only the strong will survive, but it is genuinely shocking how many people die within the first little section of this book. Like, they don't even get names. One guy, at one point, like, he has like this necklace and he's gonna propose to the love of his life when he gets back as a rider, because once you go to this school, you're not allowed to like see your family for 3 years. And he does this little thing about how he's wearing this necklace that's the necklace of the girl he loves, and he's gonna go back and marry her. 4 lines down, he falls to his death. Just deceased. Yeah, it's... And the thing is, the minute that he says he's going to go home at the end when he's a rider and he's going to ask the love of his life to marry him, you know he was going to die as well. That's the messed up part. It was so... you saw it coming. He didn't, obviously, but they never do. And what makes this even funnier is that it's mentioned multiple times throughout the book that Navarre does not have enough soldiers to keep it safe. And so they have the quadrants and the dragon riders because they need more soldiers. That's why everyone has to join one of the quadrants. Now, I am no scholar. You know, I'm not a mathematician. But perhaps the best way to build up your forces, you know, to have more soldiers to protect your land, is not to just try and kill them constantly. It is explained super early on that the Riders Quadrant is the most deadly of all of the quadrants. We are also told that statistically, most riders don't reach retirement. So like we are working with like a 95% deceased ratio here. Tell you what I would love an independent body to come into Basgiath War College and just do an assessment of the school. You know when you had that? Like you had those little visits during like primary school and secondary school where someone from like an external government body would come in to kind of see if your school was doing a good job like teaching the curriculum and had decent standards of education and the kids weren't setting fire to things. I would love to see where Basgiath would rank on one of those, because I'm pretty sure killing off half of your students on the very first day of the semester, it's not going to get you an excellent. It's not. You're not, I don't even think you'll get a good for that. You might get an okay. Also, alternative thought, instead of killing them off, is there not an alternative job that these kids could do within the college? Like, who is cooking for the students? Who is doing the cleaning? Who is doing the admin of the school? Is there admin? Because there's a lot of deaths, like surely that's a lot of paperwork. Why does everyone have to die? There's no alternative jobs? Even in Divergent, where the Dauntless were very brutal, very cutthroat, very similar to this, where like most people died, they had the factionless, right? Which is that at any time you could just tap out. Yes, okay, you would become an unlovable, unhomed loser in the Divergent world, but like that was an option that you had. Not an option here. It is, yeah, the only option is genuinely just get good or get deceased. Unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I am starting to understand why they have a shortage of soldiers, though. They should get someone to do the maths. They probably haven't got any mathematicians, actually. That's probably why they can't work out why they don't have enough soldiers. And the only explanation we get as to why anyone would join the Riders Quadrant is because of, and I quote, the glory of being a rider. That's genuinely it. The only explanation that Rebecca Yarros gives you as to why anyone would want to join the death quadrant is just because it's super glorious. So much coolness in being a dragon rider. Basically, riders are top of the social and military hierarchy in Navarre, and it's well known that it's easier to climb the ranks and to be more successful if you are a rider. Because obviously, you have a dragon. Don't know about you, but I'm not going to square off in a fight with someone who was a literal dragon. I'm not going to do that. I would just be like, yeah, you know what, you were in front of me. Crack on. You also, I think, you get paid more if you're a dragon rider, or at least I would hope so, given that then they don't have to pay the 90% of fellow classmates that burn to death. So hopefully you get their cut, their wages. Oh, and you do get powers when you bond with the dragon. So yeah, that is kind of cool, objectively. Yeah, maybe I would join the Riders Quadrant, actually. I feel like I told you there wasn't a lot of lore to get through before we could do the recap. And yet, here we are. Okay, it's cooled down a bit, so I'm going to put the jacket back on to complete the fit. Hold on. If I'm going to do a cosplay, I want to commit as fully as possible, but it's quite hard when you're absolutely... It's 30 degrees Celsius, by the way. I'm wearing thermals. Yeah. It was whose other idea this was? Genius. Genius. Also, I just realised I never mentioned the hair. If you're thinking, oh, cool, she just bought semi-permanent spray for her hair, you are right, but you're also terribly wrong. You see, I may have completely forgotten that hair colour spray was a thing. And so naturally, when I was planning to do this video, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to dye my hair. So I actually did bleach my hair for this video twice, and then rather tragically I tried to dye it silver and it went a weird shade of green. Then I was stuck like that for a week, at which point someone in my Twitch chat said, hey, have you heard of spray on hair dye? You just spray it on and it washes out with shampoo. That's what's in my hair currently, but underneath, if you can see, it is bleached. It's, yeah, look how frayed those edges are. Yeah, if that's not a reason enough to like the video, I ruined my hair for you. So my hair was actually snapping off. It wasn't good. You know, I am going to have to just cut off this entire portion of my hair. I've killed it. Much like Basquiat College does to their children. Yeah, they do. I'm now going to try and break down as best I can the military structure and hierarchy of the Riders Quadrant of Basquiat War College. Because Basquiat War College, as we've discovered, has 4 quadrants. The Riders Quadrant is one of them. We don't really find out what the other quadrants do at school. We don't really know what they're learning. I'm sure they don't all die. If they change their mind, I wonder if they're allowed to take up like cooking classes or something. I don't know. But as far as I'm aware, the Riders is the one where most people die. I don't think anyone's dying in the Healers Quadrant because something's gone terribly wrong then. You know, they're not really teaching them what they're supposed to. You can tell Miss Becky has been writing military romances for a while because we do get quite a bit of design when it comes to the military structure of this quadrant of the school. So let's break it down with some visuals to help. This is going to start to sound like one of those very long-winded maths questions you get in exams, where at the end they're going to ask you, how many friends does Becky have left? And the answer is none, because they all died in the Riders Quadrant. Riders Quadrant itself is divided into 4 wings. Get it? Because dragons. Caca. Each wing has 3 sections: flame, claw, and tail. Each one of those sections has 3 squads. First year cadets are placed in the back 2 rows of the little square that makes up each squad. Highest ranks are wing leader and section leader, both of which are positions held by 3rd year students only. After that, the next in command are the squad leaders. Everyone is considered a cadet until after bonding with a dragon at the threshing, at which point they become a rider. The threshing, which sounds suspiciously close to a vaginal yeast infection, I've been doing this too long today. Threshing is where the cadets are spread out in the fields outside of the quadrant and they walk around looking for a dragon to bond with. A bit like Pokemon, except these Pokemon will set you on fire if you give them a dirty look. Yeah, and they do. They do. Yeah. So you just literally you walk around and you got to try and find a dragon that will be your buddy. That's it. That's it. Yeah. The quadrant is a mix of we might die hedonism and brutal efficiency in the name of the same reason. Insight from Violet Sorengale, Chapter 4. So, did we get all of that? Are we all feeling very confident in our understanding of not only the board, but of Basquiat War College? It will become clearer if we go if you didn't get it, so don't worry. I think I literally have read this book 3 times now. I still am not sure I understand. I forgot that this man had a job. I got to give him a black pin. I've ran out of black pins. Can't give him a black pin. This man does not have a black pin, even though he should have a black pin because I ran out. So that's unfortunate. Right, now back to Violet. So back to Violet. She's about to enter the Riders Quadrant, but because this is obviously a school where everyone dies, they can't just like go to school. No. If Violet wants to join the Riders Quadrant, much like all the other wannabes who want to sign themselves up to ride dragons, you must first cross the parapet, which is essentially like a scary bridge with no sides. And about 15% of all the people that cross that bridge fall off it and die. Yes, they do. Death bridge, if you will. The parapet is roughly 18 inches wide, 200 feet above the ground. You'll fall, you'll die. Thankfully, for famously weak and uwu Violet, her iconic big sister Mira comes to the rescue, okay? She is a big legendary rider. Everybody loves her. She's top dog out there. Obviously not top, well, her mum's technically top. So she's a Nepo baby, but like, much like Bella Hadid, she's earned her place. She's a legend in her own right. Mira helps out Violet and genuinely saves her life multiple times in the very beginning of this book, which is giving Nepo baby in a less cool way. It's giving like Nepo baby who maybe doesn't deserve their fame, you know? Which is where we get the duality of the Nepo baby niche here. So before Violet crosses the parapet, big sis Mira gives her a few things. She gives her, one, a new pair of boots, which, I'm not being funny, if I was about to cross a death bridge that famously 15% of people fall off of, first thing I'd be doing was getting on a good pair of grippy shoes, right? That's number one. Second thing I'd be doing is getting a parachute. But Violet doesn't seem to think that through. I'm starting to think she might not be as intelligent as she thinks she is. Second thing big sis Mira gives her is a new impenetrable leather corset of dragon scales, which is very cool. Very cool. It essentially means that she cannot be like stabbed through it or be harmed or anything through her abdomen, right? Which is very, very slay and very cool and begs the question, why don't all riders, for example, have corsets made of dragon scales? Feel like that could potentially lower the death rate of your riders, but there we are. No one other than Mira in the entirety of this war college, by the way, has ever thought of giving anyone armor made of dragon scales. No one. Because the only person that gets them throughout the entirety of the book, the only one, is Violet. I guess it's just limited to Nepo babies. I'm starting to understand why all of these students die. It's because management is absolutely inept. Anyway, the last thing that Mira gives Violet is a new hairstyle. She braids her hair. Very nice. It's giving Katniss. It's giving Katniss. And it's because the parapet, lots of wind, it'll get in your hair, you'll lose your balance, you'll die. So very nice. Everyone say thank you, Mira. It is really pushed on us in like the first 5 chapters of this book just how weak and feeble Violet is. I mean, it's genuinely like every other paragraph. She walks up the stairs and her knees hurt. She has to breathe and her lungs are burning. It's a lot. What we are told though is that what Violet lacks in physical strength, she makes up for with 2 things. One, her giant, massive mega brain, which famously forgot to wear grippy shoes whilst crossing very narrow bridge that is wet. And we're also told she's very speedy and agile, which might be the same thing. I'm not entirely sure. It's been a while since I did Nintendogs, because I remember doing agility training on that. Can't remember if it was about being fast or not. In fact, Violet tells us, I'm pretty quick with daggers though. Really damn quick. Like lightning quick. The quotes that we get that show that she has a massive brain are, ditch the books. Dad can't save you. He tried. I tried. Decide, Violet. Are you going to die a scribe or live as a writer? Nice quote there from Mira. You're the smartest woman I know. Don't forget that. Your brain is your best weapon. Outsmart them, Violet. I mean, this is only chapter 1, so we can be pretty confident that she does successfully cross the parapet, but it's nice to build tension early on. Okay, so most of what we learn about Violet in the first few chapters are through this conversation that she has with Mira, where Mira basically saves her life by giving her all those new shiny bits and giving her some advice. We also find out in this little advice sharing nepotism moment that Violet should seek out her former BFF, Dane Atos. This man here. Yeah, who looks suspiciously like 4 from Divergent, but we won't get into it. Find Dane Atos. From what I hear, he's doing well. He'll keep you safe. Don't smile like that. He'll be a second year. Don't mess around with second years. If you want to get laid, and you should, often. Okay? Okay, Mira, get it? Mira's one of the girls. Considering you never know what the day brings, then screw in your own year. Nothing is worse than cadets gossiping that you've slept your way to safety. Okay, little bit of foreshadowing there, but like, truthfully, I can think of some things that would be worse than people gossiping that I slept my way to safety. Namely, dying. I think that would be worse, yes. We also get told that our girl Violet should stay away from a man called Xaden Ryerson. The blood drains from her face, and she grips the straps of my pack, turning me to face her. I just remembered. Stay the hell away from Xaden Ryerson. The air rushes from my lungs. That name. That Xaden Ryerson, she confirms, fear lacing her gaze. He's a third year, and he will kill you the second he finds out who you are. He's risen to the rank of wing leader. Stay away from him. Stay away from who? Now, you all know the rules of the romance love interest, needing to have the letters X, V, or K in their name. And if you can read, unlike Fabra, that is an X. Yeah. So if you're side-eyeing the man that Mira just spent a solid page and a half telling you to stay away from, you'd be bang on the money, babe. We then get our first view of Xaden, the aforementioned, the infamous, a little bit after this. And bad news is, he's fit. Of course he is. Of course he is. The third year turns in my direction and my heart simply stops. He's tall, with wind-blown black hair and dark brows. The line of his jaw is strong and covered in warm, tawny skin and dark stubble. And when he folds his arms across his torso, the muscles in his chest and arms ripple, moving in a way that makes me swallow. And his eyes are onyx. The contrast is startling, jaw-dropping even. Everything about him is. His features are so harsh that they looked carved, and yet they're astonishingly perfect, like an artist worked a lifetime sculpting him, and at least a year of that was spent on his mouth. He's the most exquisite man I've ever seen. Shockingly, there's more. Even the diagonal scar that bisects his left eyebrow and marks the top corner of his cheek only makes him hotter, flaming hot. Scorching hot, gets you in trouble and you like it level hot. She then, of course, finds out that this beautiful man is Xaden Ryerson. And then Xaden finds out that she is, of course, Violet Sorrengail. The black-haired rider snaps his gaze to mine, and my heart thunders for all the wrong reasons. Oh shit, I whisper, and his eyes narrow as if he can hear me over the howl of the wind that rips at my braid. Sorrengail? He steps towards me, and I look up, and up. Good gods, I don't even reach his collarbone. He's massive. He's 6'4", yeah. Itty bitty tiny girl Violet, who I think canonically is like 5'5", 5'6". Yeah, her love interest is 6'4". And that is mentioned many a time. It's brought up more than it should be. If you think that you could forget for a moment that our main character is but a small, dainty little flower, you'd be so mistaken. There's no chance to forget because it is mentioned on basically every single page. You're General Sorrengail's youngest. His voice is deep and accusatory. You're Fen Ryerson's son, I counter. He will kill you the second he finds out who you are. Mira's words bounce around my skull and fear knots in my throat. Are you going to kill me? I lift my chin another inch. His gaze clashes with mine as the sky opens and rain falls in a deluge, soaking my hair, my leathers, and the stones around us in seconds. Xaden never takes his eyes from me, watching silently with a look I can't interpret. Why would I waste my energy killing you when the parapet will do it for me? A wicked smile curves up his lips. Your turn. Oh, did I mention that this is an enemies to lovers trope? No? Oh, well, this is it. And you didn't work it out from the page-long warning Mira gave us to stay away from the man with an X in his name? Someone needs to read more romantasy books. Okay, so some quick lore about Xaden Ryerson, this man here, and spoiler, our love interest for this book. His dad is dead. Lots of dead daddies in this book. His father's name is Fen Ryerson, and he was a rebel with a cause, and that cause was trying to overthrow the government. Fen Ryerson kills Brennan, I think indirectly because of the war, or directly, I'm not 100% sure, but Brennan dies fighting the rebels, of which Fen Ryerson was in charge of. So whether it was direct or not doesn't matter. Xaden's dad gets Brennan killed. Now, Violet's mum, General Lilith Sorrengail, was famously part of the government that Fen Ryerson was trying to overthrow. I'm now realising maybe I should have had a Fen Ryerson here. Hold on. Should I just stick a little name tag on it? Hold on. I can do it. Hold on. Ow. These pins are so spiky. Do it like this. Hold on. Fen Ryerson. There we are. Beautiful. Nice. We'll just put him here. That's his daddy dearest. Where's my string? I'm now going to string together Xaden and Fen. Daddy dearest. Oh, I'll link them to the rebel one, because that probably makes the most sense. There we go. Nice. Little rebellion together. Beautiful. So, General Lilith Sorrengail of said government Fen is trying to overthrow ends up killing Fen Ryerson. Are you with me? Ends the coup. Okay, it's done. The leader's done. He's martyred. The government, and government is a very loose term here because we are aware that there is a king in Navarre and there's a government, but the government seems to just consist of generals, like the Sorrengails, so I'm a bit confused how that works. It's not really fully fleshed out, I'll be honest. Doesn't really matter. All you need to know is that the government ends up then killing all of the rebels. They win. Coup is over. They decide that that might not be good enough though, and they float the idea of murdering the children of the rebels as well, when someone has the genius idea of, hey, that would be unjust, but what if we happen to have a war college where like 75% of the students die anyway? Then it wouldn't be our fault if they died. It's not unethical because we didn't sentence them to death, they just weren't good enough. At which point everyone was like, yeah, that's such an ethical solution to a complex problem. So then the children of the rebels, which are the people with the red pins, are then all forced into becoming riders, which means when they turn of age, all children of rebels have to attempt to join the riders quadrant. Live or not, you have to join. There's no choice for you, babes. Regular people can choose to join the scribes, the healers, or the infantry, but unfortunately the children of the rebels, they got to join the riders quadrant because the government, well, to be honest, they just want them dead. And that way they don't have to do it themselves, so they can claim that they are ethical and fair. Nice, politically smart, I see, advantageous. Naturally, as you would if someone had murdered your parents and then forced you to join a death school, all of the children of the rebels have beef with everyone, actually. They actually just actively hate every single other character in this book, which I kind of respect, and I get it, truly. And in order to try and separate the children of the rebels from children from people who didn't try and overthrow the government, all of the children of the rebels, I've got to find a different way, rebel kids, I'm going to call them the rebel kids. All of the rebel kids are given a rebellion relic tattoo, which is like a marking on their back that shows that they're not like the other girls. No, they are the children of political dissenters. Their parents did do a coup, which honestly I think I would be more pissed about. Don't get me wrong, going to the 75% death rate college, not great, okay? Not ideal. But there is a chance that I'll get a dragon and superpowers out of it. So having to have a mandatory tattoo that is probably ugly, that crosses a line. That would make me pissed enough to want to start another uprising. Also, side note, which I think really speaks to the fact that the generals, the government, have not one brain cell to share between them. If I had a bunch of children whose parents I slaughtered, who I know all hate me because I slaughtered their parents, you know what I probably wouldn't do? I probably wouldn't put them in a position where they could gain access to dragons and superpowers. You've just armed them against you, you dumbass. Anyway, moving on. Violet is gearing up to cross the Death Bridge. That's where we are, the parapet. And then we meet a lovely girlie called Rhiannon. Rhiannon becomes BFF number 1 because they share a shoe. Well, not both of them at the same time. It's not the same shoe. Basically, Violet realises that she's got terrible shoes on. She's going to slip and fall and die. And so Violet takes off one of her shoes and gives them to Rhiannon. Great. And now Rhiannon has one good shoe, and somehow that's enough to help her not fall on her face or fall to her death. Besties and allies assured, for sure. Violet is about to start walking across the parapet, and she gives her name. She says Violet Sorrengail. Cool, very cool. And just as she's about to step out onto the parapet, we get this line. Thunder cracks above me. The sound is oddly comforting. Crazy. We also get to meet Jack in this chapter, who instantly gives major bully vibes. He actually tries to push Violet off the bridge. Yeah, he does. Total stranger, has never met her before, just thinks, you know what, may as well. What is his motivation, you ask, for doing that? Can't remember. He's feeling a little bit homicidal. I think his beef is genuinely that she's just small and weak. It's just actually so unserious. It genuinely is. He just was like, she's so small, so weak, I'm just gonna chuck her off a bridge. Violet does actually end up putting a knife to his balls though, in retribution, once she crosses the bridge. And that is, I have to say, that is pretty slay. That is pretty iconic. That was the bit that made me like Violet. Because up until this point, all we know of Violet is that she is small and dainty and weak. Weak enough that it enraged one man so much he wanted to throw her off a bridge. But yeah, she does get him back. She crosses the parapet before him because he starts after her. And she just pulls a knife on his balls. And we get this very cool little section of dialogue. Murder is etched in his narrowed glacial blue eyes as he glares down at me, and where the tip of my dagger now indents the fabric of his breeches against his balls. I think I'll be safe for now. I managed to say between ragged breaths, my muscles trembling but my hand more than steady. Will you? Jack vibrates with rage, his thick blonde brows slashing over arctic blue eyes, which again is the second time we're told that his eyes are very blue. We get it. It's given ocean eyes Billie Eilish. You know what I mean? He gets very angry at her for holding him by the balls, or at least holding him at ball point. Holding him at knife point by the balls? Ball point. Holding him at ball point. So they both give their name to the person at the other side of the parapet who has to make note of who lived and who dies. So Violet gives her name and then Jack gives his name, even though he's technically not off the parapet yet. Violet's over the edge, like on safe side. Jack is still technically on the parapet. So then the male rider who writes down the name says, "Well, Jack," the male rider on my right says slowly, scratching the trim lines of his dark goatee. "Cadet Sorrengail has you by the actual balls here, in more ways than one. She's right. You want to kill her? You'll have to do it in the sparring ring or on your own time. That is, if she decides to let you off the parapet. Because technically, you're not on the grounds yet. So you are not a cadet. She is." They have this beef where Jack essentially says he's gonna break her neck, kill her, and Violet says, well, according to the codex, you can't actually kill me as cadets. You have to wait until a formal session of training or fighting to kill me. You can't just like kill me randomly, right? She quotes the codex quite a lot in this book, and the codex is essentially like the rule book for the school. Like it's kind of like their laws. Almost. It kind of gets her out of a few pickles. She essentially says, are you going to follow the rules? And she forces Jack to say, yes, I will follow the rules and I will not try and kill you unless there is a formal opportunity to do so. And she then makes the stupidest decision in the book, and she decides to let that man cross the parapet and onto the college grounds. Now, not being funny, if it were you or me, and this random man, total stranger, has spent the last 5 minutes telling you the ways in which he wants to murder you, would you offer that man the opportunity to murder you, but only in a formal setting where that's legal? Or would you do the normal thing and ram your knife through his balls and he falls off the parapet? Sorry, it's going to be knife to the balls. I'm not going to let that man cross onto college grounds when I know that I am now his number 1 target for murder. Babes, I'm sorry, but maybe murder is allowed sometimes. Murder him. So Violet and Rhiannon cross the parapet. Incredible work, ladies. Well done, you didn't die. All of the cadets that survive end up gathering in the courtyard of Basquiat. And this happens pretty much every single morning. They have like a big roll call and you have to stand in your military formations, which means you stand with your squad and then you stand with your squad with your wings. And because it's the first day, all the cadets are of course getting to find out what squad they're in. And luckily for main protagonist Violet, the only person she befriended conveniently happens to be in her squad, which conveniently happens to be led by none other than BFF of protagonist Daenatos. However, in true enemies to lovers fashion, after Xaden discovers that Violet Sorrengail is big government Lilith Sorrengail's daughter, he, as wing leader, which means he is top dog, which we will talk about why that is makes no sense. I've got many thoughts about that. Anyway, he, as wing leader, uses his power, his authority, to move Daenatos' entire squad into the 4th wing, aka his wing, which means that he is now directly in charge of the daughter of his arch nemesis, which means that now, despite Mira's many warnings for Violet to stay away from Xaden, she quite literally cannot. She is his subordinate, and he will use that often. It's not looking good for our girl Violet. At first, when I was reading this, I did think it was kind of weird behaviour that a man who allegedly hates her would want her nearer to him and be forced to see her every day. But then I realised it's actually a power move. It's a power play, because now he can just torture her. He can use and abuse her, if you will. Not like that. Get your mind out the gutter. We're not even at the smart part yet. We also learn when she's crossing the parapet that she has this method for keeping herself calm, which is that she starts to recite history and facts. Can't relate. That's not personally how I choose to lower my stress, is to relive A-level history. Not really. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is because it happens quite a few times in the book and it becomes quite important in one chapter. But for the most part, most of what it is like really chunky, dry lore dumps that feel a bit like exposition in the place of actual world building. A lot of what you learn about Navarre as a realm, as a world, is through Violet's kind of like fact recitals in her head, which means you just get like entire pages of lore dump without anything else. It is very dry and, to be honest, a bit boring. I feel like there could have been much better ways to put that in there, which a lot of other fantasy and romantasy writers do a lot better. But given that this is her first romantasy book and she's never had to write fantasy lore before and world builds, because all of her other stuff has been contemporary, so you don't have to tell people what Colorado's like. They know it exists. Laws are very similar to most of the other countries, so I think it's maybe a new skill that she was learning for this book that it comes across a bit clumsily done when you've read like decent fantasy books that do it very well. I'm not sure if anyone else noticed this or if it's just me. Most of it is not really Easter eggs or that useful, I don't think, but I'll just give you the TLDR quotes. The continent is home to 2 kingdoms, and we've been at war for 400 years. Navarre is my home, and is the larger kingdom, with 6 unique provinces. Tyrandor, which borders Krovla, within the Poramiel kingdom, along with Breivik and Saigenesin. Half of these words, very difficult to pronounce, and I just glazed over them when I was reading. This is the first time I've ever had to pronounce any of these words, but I don't think they actually come up again, so I think we're fine. With the Esben Mountains providing a natural border. Beyond Krovla lie the distant barrens, a desert. Within Navarre, Tyrandor was the last of the bordering provinces to join the alliance and swear fealty to King Reginald. It was also the only province to attempt succession 627 years later, which would have eventually left our kingdom defenseless had they been successful. The kingdom of Poramiel mainly consists of arable plains and marshlands and is known for exceptional textiles, endless fields of grain, and unique chrysaline gems capable of amplifying minor magics. In contrast, Navarre's mountainous regions offer an abundance in ore, hardy timber, limitless deer, and elk. Like, bro, I'm gonna be honest, who cares? Not once in this book do they go hunting for deer. Like, this is not Twilight. I don't just go around a corner, see Edward nuzzling on a deer. He's not just getting down on an elk. You know what I mean? This is not relevant, and it is so long and so boring, and it goes on for seemingly endless forever. So I'm going to skip over some more of this. The trade agreement of reason, signed more than 200 years ago, ensures the exchange of meat and lumber from Navarre for cloth and agriculture within Poramiel 4 times a year at the Abathan outpost in the border of Krolova and Tyrandor. Tyrandor encompasses the southwest of the continent, made up of hostile, mountainous terrain and borders of the Emerald Sea to the west and the Artal Ocean of the south of Tyrandor. Basically, Tyrandor is like impenetrable because they got a bunch of mountains and like they've got a trade deal. Could have said that in 2 lines. Why has this gone on for 3 pages? Did you understand all that? Because I didn't. Basically, right, I'm going to give you the TLDR of all of those quotes because that's just ridiculous. Essentially, there are 2 kingdoms. Navarre, where we are set, and it's been at war for 400 years or so with Poramiel. Big difference between the 2 lands of Poramiel and Navarre. Navarre has dragon riders, whereas Poramiel has griffin riders. If you want to Google and look at what an image of a griffin looks like, just saying, I think the dragons are cooler. Both use magical beasts to siphon magic. What was the war about, you might ask? Why are they at war? Not really sure, but thank God I know that Navarre has elk. Thank God. Within Navarre, there was a rebellion from Tyrandor. They were once their own kingdom, and I think the rebellion was to try and take back their independence for their kingdom. They were all killed and their kids were sent to be riders. The rebel kids, the aforementioned rebel kids. This is the only factoid from her lore dumps that's actually important, is that Fenrisen had that Viva la Revolution moment to try and take back independence of a kingdom that was kind of sworn into an agreement of other kingdoms and was consumed by Navarre. We then have the Wyverns and the Venom. At this point, hasn't mentioned in any of her lore dumps, but I don't know where else I would put this in order to kind of prepare you for it prior to this. So I'm just going to chuck it in here. At the beginning of the book, we are introduced to the Wyvern and the Venom as like these fairy tale creatures. They're kind of nightmare characters from children's tales. But what we find out very quickly is that the book that Violet is referencing when she talks about the Wyvern and the Venom, like in her internal monologues, is a children's book that doesn't technically exist. It's a book that only she has read, and she got it from her father, scribe, father, smart bookman. And that is the only example that she has of this children's book. And she, I think, thinks for a long time that everyone else knows this book exists and like has read it and it's the children's stories, but then quickly finds out that that isn't the case and thinks, that's kind of weird that I am the only one who's read this one book in the entirety of this kingdom. But she kind of keeps that to herself. So Wyvern kill dragons, Venom ride Wyvern, and Venom are Evel Knievel, and they have magic. But it's not the same as the other magic that's referenced in the book. It doesn't come from like a magical beast. Like, for example, dragons give their riders a type of magic, and then there's another type of magic channeled from beasts. The magic that the Venom use is not that kind of magic. It's not very specific, so I really don't want you to ask me any more questions in the comments about that. This is the best I can do. Truly, I do not understand. I think it pulls from like dark magic. I think it like pulls from death and like bad things. It was her first time writing fantasy and it shows. Are you keeping up? Be honest with me. No, that's fair enough. At this point in the book, we get to finally meet Dane Atos. This guy, right? This man here. He is gagged to see Violet cross the parapet and walk into the riders' quadrant. He is so gagged, in fact, that he tries to sneak her back into the scribes. He's like, weak girl, no ride dragon. Weak girl for the books. There you go, ma'am. Let me just pick you up because you're so tiny and carry you back to where you belong. Yeah, he's basically so certain she'll die, and we find out that they've been besties most of their life until Dane went into the Riders Quadrant, and then you don't have any contact with anyone once you're at school, which is really interesting because then you obviously don't know if your dude died or not. I think they're allowed to write letters at some points, but not till later on. I think that's because in case you die, they don't want to send a letter and it gets to your family and you're already dead, because that'd be a bit like, you know, could you imagine? Having a great time, mum. School's really nice and everyone's lovely. You write back, it's like, sorry, return to sender. This child is now deceased. Anyway, yeah, Dane tries to send her back to the scribes because he thinks she's going to die. This goes on for a while. Like, all of their conversations for like the next 10 chapters or so go a bit like this. You can't be a rider because you're too tiny and you're going to die. Oh, Dane, I know I'm the itty-bitty littlest little rider that anybody's ever seen, and I'm so weak and fragile, but I'm also speedy and agile and smart, and I will definitely survive in the college where 75% of able-bodied people also die, but I, as one person who is literally physically impaired, will definitely survive. Even though I'm tiny. I know I would not be surviving the Riders Quadrant, all right? I'm going to be so honest. My disability, I'd be out in seconds, okay? Dragon would sniff me, be like, absolutely not, you're cooked, and toast me, okay? I'm Team Dane, I'm sorry. This quadrant kills 75% of the students, right? And most of those students are not ittle-bittle tiny weak people, right? Just from a logical point of view, it is very, very, very unlikely that Violet is making this out alive, okay? And that is pressed on us so many times throughout the book. I am Team Dane. He is genuinely just trying to protect his friend. Violet refuses every single time out of stubbornness more than common sense, because if she did have some common sense, she should just join the scribes, because once you join a quadrant, you can't swap. That's like the rule. You're not allowed to swap. Part of her is like, oh, I can't swap to the scribes because my mum's gonna find out and she's gonna toast roast me. But like, to be honest, do you really care about your mum's opinions? She genuinely like sent you to a riders college to die. She knows you're weak, babe. And she was like, well, not my fault. You care about her opinion? That's crazy. Truly. But yeah, so we find out that Dane is a squad leader, which is represented here by his little black pin, and then he's got his little underlings here. The description of Dane goes as follows. Taller than he was last summer. The beard that cuts across his jaw is new, and he's filled out in a way that makes me blink. The beautiful, easygoing smile that starred in way too many of my fantasies is far from the scowl that purses his mouth, and everything about him seems a little harder, but it works for him. The line of his chin, the set of his brow, even the muscles of his biceps are rigid under my fingers. Sometime in the last year, Dane Atos went from attractive to gorgeous, and I'm about to be sick all over his boots. I am gonna like speed run this because it's 500 pages, this book, babe. It's girthy. I honestly have been talking for like 3 hours at this point. It's never ending. Violet and Dane have known each other since they were 5 and 6 respectively. So Dane is a year above Violet when it comes to like going to school, right? They were best friends and Violet had a bit of a crush on him. He offers multiple times to switch her to the scribe quadrant, and they have conversations that revolve around that basically for the next like 20 chapters. It's ridiculous. It's so annoying. He's just basically trying to convince her to go back to the scribes. He sounds very whiny in Violet's point of view, which is kind of why we as a reader start disliking him, because he just seems like he doesn't respect her choices. Has he never heard of feminism? Okay, this is her choice. Violet is very displeased that Dane sees her as weak and too weak to survive the Riders quadrant, and is upset that he has no faith in her. So it causes a rift between the two and they kind of stop being besties despite Dane trying. Which, I'm not being funny, it's not really fair, is it? Like, on reflection, 75% of people are dying. She's weak and meek, which, how could we forget, you know? Anyway, I've pulled a couple of quotes that kind of sum up this kind of dynamic. I'm not saying you didn't just kick absolute ass to get here, Vi. Sorry, some of the dialogue is very forced. It's very forced. It's a little bit painful. It reads a little bit like what someone thinks a cool person would say, and no cool person has ever said it, actually. Anyway, but you have to leave. You'll break the first time they put you in the ring, and that's before the dragon sense that you're... I'm what? I'm what? Go ahead. Say it. When they sense that I'm less than the others? Is that what you mean? Damn it. You know what I mean. Even if you survive threshing, there's no guarantee a dragon will bond with you. And they're all perfectly healthy. Yikes. Yikes. I know we've only just met him, but cancelled. It's giving ableism. But like, also it's not entirely ableism because it's not entirely clear that she has a disability in the book. Again, I read this whole book thinking she was just like weak and needed to go to the gym, but like turns out actual disability. The only other disability that we are given, kind of like introduced to in this entire book, is Jezania is a scribe who is deaf, and that is the only other disability in the book. So it's not like a common thing for people to have disabilities, so I don't know if it's particularly clear that Violet has a disability and it's not just weak. So it's kind of like, it's a complicated one, I guess, but low-key kind of cancelled for not being feminist. So we've officially made it to like chapter 5. Congrats, guys. That is where we're at. I'm going to put some little strings on here to represent what we know so far. We know that this woman knows this man, who knows this man. Beautiful. That's done. Obviously, we got our little besties here. So Dane and Violet obviously know each other since they were little wee kids. Little besties for sure. Look at that. Aren't they all best friends? And then we've got Violet and Xaden, who obviously just met. Lovely. Nice. Now everybody knows each other, kind of. Now, at Basquiat, Violet is obviously very small, very fragile, which means anytime there is any kind of physical training, any kind of fighting, which happens every few chapters, she does very poorly, I'll be honest. She gets her shit rocked more than once in this book. But you have to remember that Violet is famously gifted and talented at school. Yes, she was. She was in those extracurricular classes. Her GPA is through the roof. Now, remember earlier when I said, who does the cooking, who does the cleaning in Basquiat College? Instead of dying, why can't the riders go and do those jobs? And that's because the riders already do those jobs. So in Basquiat, in the riders quadrant, it's not the same for the other quadrants. It's just the riders quadrant. The riders have to do their own cooking and cleaning. It's confusing to say the least. She realizes that if she is on breakfast duty, if she chooses to get up very, very early every morning and cook everyone's food, she can essentially just start poisoning her opponents. So she can just win the fights because they are violently unwell. Don't know about you, but she's definitely not passing any food hygiene inspections anytime soon. Everyone who eats her food ends up in the infirmary. So because Violet has decided she is now more lethal than Salmonella, Violet then wins 5 out of 5 of her fights because they all mysteriously become unwell. You're telling me that no single person thought that was a little bit suspicious? Not a single one. They're just knocking around like that. Is just crazy. Absolutely crazy that all 5 of Violet's opponents just all got the shits. That's crazy. I think the only one that actually clocks on, and we don't find this out till way later in the book, is of course Xaden. And he says, taking out your enemy before the battle is really smart. I'll give you that. You're good, but I've known better poison masters. The trick is not to make it quite so obvious. You turned oranges into a weapon. Now, another little bit of Nepo perks here. I've got to just drip feed this in at this very important pivotal moment where he says, I've known better poison masters. Violet's mum was 2 for 2 with the rider icons, and then she just had this random loose string. I guess she wanted to tidy it up so she could just keep saying she was 2 for 2 with the legendary riders. She's just a bit of a disappointment because she's a nerd. So I'm starting to understand more and more why she just chucked her in the Riders Quadrant. She was like, either you become one of us, legendary rider, or you join your dad. We find out that Brannon wrote a diary during his time in Basquiat. Technically, this isn't allowed, not only because this diary is full of like little cheat codes as to how to get through Basquiat College easier. It's also not allowed because it is a dead person's belongings. And in this book, when people die, you have to burn all of their belongings in tribute to a god. That means that Brennan's diary should have been burnt when Brennan died. And the fact that Mira still has it is very cheeky. Anyway, Mira ends up using Brennan's diary to get through her own time at Basquiat easier. She then sneaks the diary to Violet, and Violet then gets this little book full of cheat codes, right? Which we get to read excerpts of throughout the book. The one thing that we learn at this point from Brannon's little cheat code book is how to find out who your opponent is in the fights. And Violet, of course, uses this information to poison those people. I mean, very twisted, but kind of iconic. Like, you gotta give her that. That's kind of fun. This is, by the way, kind of the only explanation we get as to why nobody questioned that Violet was poisoning her opponents, because it is not actually told to you until you step on the mat who your opponent is going to be. It's supposed to be a secret. So the only way that Violet avoids suspicion for poisoning everyone is because she had Brennan's secret magic book of tricks. Which, again, Nepo baby. I'm not being funny. This whole book is just about the benefits of being a Nepo baby. I was a bit fuming at this point because for all of that talk that she gave Dane about how smart she is, how she's so capable of surviving on her own, come off it, babe. Genuinely, Brennan literally told you what to do and you only knew what Brennan said because Mira gave the book to you. You are not smart, you're a Nepo baby. Check your privilege, babe, okay? Honestly, she should at least be honest about it, okay? She should do a Maya Hawke. Admit you're a Nepo baby, but prove you're talented anyway. Okay, all she's doing right now is denying her privilege and acting like she's all that, when truthfully, you didn't even bring boots onto the parapet. I remember that, Violet. Don't even start. Outrageous. Yeah, so that is basically how Violet gets away with poisoning everyone without being detected, is that they're all like, but how did she know who she was fighting? Okay, so during this training poisoning saga, we actually get a little run-in between Violet and Xaden. A little midnight run-in, a midnight rendezvous, if you will. And we get our first piece of like little flirty banter. I'm imagining that you are not picturing this midnight rendezvous beginning with Violet hiding in a tree, but she is. She's hiding in a tree, she's looking for poison berries, and Xaden is actually having a little communal gathering of rebellion kids and having a little knit-natter under a tree. Now, this is a secret meeting happening around the very tree that Violet is hiding in. Crazy that out of all of the trees, you know, that's just classic. Hate it when that happens. Now, Xaden is hosting a secret little meetup for a bunch of rebel kids. I think there are about 12 of them, and this is illegal. And I don't think I mentioned why this is illegal, but this is illegal because by law, rebel kids are not allowed to gather in groups more than 3. Why, you may ask? The government decided that if they are meeting in groups more than 3, they could be plotting, because famously, plotting is an activity done only when there's more than 3 of you. You cannot plot or scheme At 3 or less, it's not done. It can't be done. You need at least 4 people to scheme and plot. That is true, that is true. So, what are they doing at the secret meeting by the tree? The illegal meeting where there's like 12 of them, you ask, and I'll answer. Basically, Xaden is running an advice camp, and Violet is overhearing this, and essentially, Xaden is giving them advice on how to survive in Basquiat. And Xaden does this because the rebel kids are given no help in the college about how to survive, and the senior management kind of hates them, to be honest, because they are famously hoping that they die, because obviously they're super ethical and they didn't just want to murder them themselves. They wanted to give them at least the chance of dragons. It's kind of nice because obviously those kids are forced to be riders. Half of them don't even want to be there. In fact, all of them don't really want to be there. He's kind of comforting them, but also telling them, like, stop crying, don't be a little bitch, because dragons can smell fear and they will toast and roast you like a nice little marshmallow. So yay, Xaden is what we get out of this. Good guy Xaden. Maybe not as bad as perhaps we had thought. He is a rebel with a cause. And that cause is keeping the kids alive. After Xaden does his nice Good Samaritan bit, the rebel kids go away, and then he confronts Violet. And we are to assume he has known Violet's up that tree for most of the time, okay? He knows, but he waits until the kids are gone to confront her. And I'm going to show you some of the dialogue between these two at this point, because it is a really good example of just how addictive Yarros' kind of sexual tension writing is. And I think that's because she does it well, because she has been doing it for a very long time, this kind of romance side of things. It loses it a little bit in Iron Flame, I'll be honest with you. There's a reason I DNF'd this book the first time. We'll get to it. Okay, let me set the scene for you. Kids are asking, when do we get to kill Violet Sorrengail? And Xaden steps in, and he goes, I told you already. The youngest Sorrengail is mine, and I'll handle her when the time is right. I mean, I know he's talking about killing me, but did he have to make it sound so good? All the kids leave. Violet climbs out the tree, which is genuinely quite funny, because the number of times that this woman says she wants to climb this man like a tree throughout this book is too many times, actually. You think that would be a weird thing to say even once. Doesn't get any less weird the more times you say it. In fact, it becomes more weird, I would argue. Anyway, I got off topic. Violet comes out the tree. A shadow lunges for me, and I open my mouth to scream, but my air is cut off by an elbow around my neck as I am yanked against a hard chest. Scream and you die, he whispers. Sorrengail. He yanks back the hood of my cloak. Swoon. Girls, I'm swooning. Someone call my therapist. How did you know? Let me guess. You smelled my perfume. Isn't that what always gives the heroine away in books? He scoffs. I command shadows. But sure, it was your perfume that gave you away. What? Atos hasn't warned you not to get caught alone in the dark with me yet? Sir. Is this how you plan to handle me? Eavesdropping, were we? Now I might actually have to kill you. I'm more dangerous than you think, I flat out bluster. So I see. I'm quaking in my boots. The corner of his mouth rises into a mocking smirk. Then she throws 2 daggers at his head, like either side. You missed. He doesn't even flinch. Did I? Why don't you back up a couple of steps and test that theory? Curiosity flares in his eyes and he moves backward. His eyes locks with mine. His back hits the tree and the hilts of my daggers brush his ears. Tell me again that I missed. Fascinating. You look all frail and breakable, but you're really a violent little thing, aren't you? You should show that little trick to Jack, Xaden says, turning his palms upwards and offering me my daggers. I'm sorry? The neck-snapping first year who very publicly vowed to slaughter you? Xaden clarifies as my blade presses against his cloak at the level of his abdomen. He reaches under my cloak and slides one blade into the sheath at my thigh. Then pulls back the side of my cloak and pauses. His gaze locks onto the length of my braid where it falls over my shoulder, and I could swear he stops breathing for a heartbeat before he slides the remaining dagger into one of the sheaths at my ribs. He'd probably think twice about plotting your murder if you threw a few daggers at his head. He glances at the dagger poised at his stomach. Do you plan on telling anyone about my little club? His eyes meet mine and there's nothing but cold, calculating death waiting there. No, I answer truthfully. Why not? It's illegal for the children of separatist officers to assemble in groups of larger than 3, I'm well aware. I've lived in Basquiat longer than you. And you're not gonna run off to mommy or your precious little Dane and tell them we've been assembling? His gaze narrows on mine. Anyway, she says, nah babe, I will not, and he goes to leave. You're not gonna handle me? I call after him. Not tonight, he tosses over his shoulder. What are you waiting for? It's no fun if you're expecting it. Now get back to bed before your wing leader realizes you're out after curfew. What? You're my wing leader. And scene. Do you see what I'm saying? It's great enemies to lovers territory. It's very good. And this is something that Rebecca does very well, has no problems with. Okay, I just realized how dark it got. I'm gonna do my own little bit of magic now. And the next time you see me, it's gonna be bright and early in the daytime. I've just realized that you can't even see the full outfit when I'm wearing this. So it is a bit of a letdown. I've done a full outfit in for what? So this feels like a good time to drop some more lore on you. Yes, there is more. And I know I said in the beginning that this book, the world building, leaves something to be desired. It's a bit lackluster. And then every 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, and by the way, there's another huge piece of lore that you must know. I don't, two things can be true at once is what I'm learning. Bear with me, because this is actually important lore that you need to know in order to be able to understand literally anything else that's going to happen in this book. Once a rider has a dragon, and we'll get to how they get a dragon in a minute, they get a type of magic specific to them and their dragon through something called a signet, which is not just a ring that really rich men wear. No, it's way cooler. A lot of the signets that people get are usually like common magic, which are things that lots of people can do, but occasionally there's someone with a super rare and cool signet that is a really sought after type of magic. Now, in a crazy, completely unforeseen turn of events, despite signets that are powerful allegedly being rare, somehow pretty much all of our main characters have one. Super rare. Now, some signets are so rare that they get classified by big government, aka Violet's mum and Dane's daddy. They say these signets are too powerful and See, big government is trying to silence me. They turn around and they say, these signets are so useful for the government, so useful for our really important work at overthrowing people like Fenrison, who, by the way, I've got a new drawing for. This is a French man saying down with the government, vive la révolution. That is how I picture Xaden's dad, Fenrison. He's just a French man. Anyway, some signets are so rare, government classifies them, and we'll get onto that a little bit later in the story. But for now, the signets that we know are as follows. Mira's signet, Violet's sister, has something to do with wards. Like she's like a shield. She can like keep things out. I don't know. This doesn't really get specified much until the second book. I'm a little bit confused about that too. So if you're wanting clarity, I'm not the person to ask. Big government, aka Violet's mum. Her signet is that she can control the weather. Very cool. It's giving Storm from X-Men. Brennan, he is a powerful mender. Now, I know none of you could have worked this out, but a mender, what they can do is mend things. Yeah. Unfortunately, though, he couldn't mend the hole in his chest that Xaden's dad shot through him with a crossbow. And so, unfortunately, he is still deceased. Now, Dane, remember him? Childhood best friend Dane? Big Dane's signet is classified. So we don't really know what his signet is, and he's not allowed to tell anyone until later in the book. But between you and me, between us girlies, Dane's signet is that if he touches people, he can read their most recent memories. Don't know about you, but I would hate that. Personally, any form of mind reading sounds terrible to me. I would genuinely rather not know what people thought about me. I have a YouTube comment section that is insight enough. It'd just be like having access to Twitter constantly. When you got asked as a child, what did you want as a superpower? If you chose mind reading, you need to go to therapy. You care too much about what people think of you. But yeah, that is Dane's secret signet. Not so secret now, because I've told the girls. Dane does tell Violet his signet at the beginning of the book, but he explicitly tells her that in order to read someone's recent memories, he has to touch his hands to their temple and gives her kind of a demonstration. Remember this detail because it's very specific, and surprise, surprise, it comes up again later. Now, if you're sat here wondering, I wonder what our dark, brooding enemy to lover, what his power is, you're never gonna guess. It's so out of nowhere. His signet is shadow wielding. I did kind of give that away in the little bit of dialogue we had here where he mentions that Dane should have warned her not to get caught in the dark with him because he's a shadow wielder. Seems a little bit OP. Control shadows, and they're like borderline sentient. So if you're in the dark, he's gonna whip a shadow around you. Even if there's like a little tiny patch of shadow, he's pulling it out. I should hope so, because these lot are way too young to procreate. In this world, shadow wielding is a crazy powerful signet, and it makes most people terrified of him right off the bat. Now, the reason why Xaden's so powerful is because the dragon that he bonded is one of the most powerful dragons ever, and her name is Sigil. She's a girl boss. I think that's how you pronounce her name, by the way. If it's not, please politely correct me. I didn't write the book. Rebecca Yarros did. Shout at her for not pronouncing the words right, okay? Right, now you got that lore, I want to just do a little sidebar back to the story. Now, Violet famously almost got thrown off the parapet by a very angry man named Jack Barlow, who, because of his name, I spent the entirety of this book picturing looked like Jack Harlow, the rapper. This man was trying to snap this woman's neck at multiple points in this book, and all I could picture was this man. This man said, put a bad bitch in a friend zone. More like put Violet Sorrengail in the end zone, because Jack Barlow wants to slit her throat. Jack Barlow, throughout this entire book, is actively trying to kill her. Like, constantly. Anytime she's on the mat, he's throwing daggers with his eyes. Not literally, although that does happen later. So much so that everyone who is in the fourth wing, which is everyone with a yellow tag, pretty much every single person on this board, they all are aware that Jack wants to kill her. Like, he's not making it hidden. He's actively trying to commit a criminal offense here. If that were me in that situation, if a man was trying to murder me and he was actively trying, like making no secret of how much he wants to murder me, I simply would not be going out in the middle of the night alone. I mean, I don't go out in the middle of the night alone right now, and there's not a specific man that wants me dead, okay? If there was a specific man that wanted me dead, I wouldn't be out tree climbing. You know what I mean? Yes, you could say, oh, she needed poison berries. Do it in the daytime. Do it in the daytime. Tell people your agility training. I don't know, Violet. You're supposed to be smart. I'm supposed to believe she's a big brain who would have made it in the scribes. The scribes wouldn't have her because, quite frankly, she is stupid. Fast forwarding a bit, predictably, we do start to get a bit of love triangle jealousy trope in here between Dane, Violet, and Xaden. Weirdly, we're not really told why Violet stopped having a crush on Dane. We're told that previously, before he went to the Riders, she had a crush on him. When she sees him again, they're friendly, but she's not like, hee hee. Their friendship very quickly unravels though, because obviously, like I said, he keeps trying to send it back to the scribes, and she's like, no sir, I will not be writing, I will be riding. My wing leader, Xaden Ryerson. At one point, Violet is fighting someone on the mats, and Dane says something is not fair, and we get this nice little interaction between Dane and Xaden. I hardly think it's fair. No one asked you to think, squad leader. He did kind of gag him there. And to be honest, you can really tell that Dane does not get paid for thinking, because if he did, he would probably shut up more often. He just drove a wedge between him and Violet for no reason. He could have stopped talking at any point, and they probably would have got together, and she would have stayed away from Xaden. But he just couldn't shut his mouth. A bit like me, because this recap is very long. Xaden occasionally teaches Violet how to fight, because, you know, famously she's very small and dainty and little and weak. I'm going to tell you a secret, just between you and me. Just between us girls. These scenes are ridiculously hot. Yes, they are. I have no shame in admitting that. That's a lie. I have a lot of shame. We don't really get much of an explanation as to why he's doing this, other than the fact that we think it might be because Violet hasn't told anyone, hasn't snitched, that he's the head tutor of the How to Get Through Murder School for Children of the Rebellion. I'm going to read you a little excerpt of them training so you can get the vibes. I fling a dagger at his ridiculously well-sculpted chest. He catches it and clucks his tongue. Already seen that move. Okay, maybe I should fling more daggers at men. Then we get this little interaction. Going for blood today, are we, Violence? My name is Violet. I think my version fits you better. I'm screaming, but actually I don't like this nickname. I like the interaction, don't like this nickname. Violence? You're telling me that a grown man, and this man is grown, decides to call this woman, who's famously meek and mild, Violence, as a nickname? Of course, every enemies to lovers trope needs a nickname that initially starts off as condescending and then becomes kind of soft over time. Not really sure Violence is doing it for me though. Violence? I'm sorry, but even the Twisted books had better nicknames than that. Sunshine worked better than that, okay? Violence? At some points in this book, some things are said and done that make you think that this is how someone thinks cool people speak, without ever having met someone who was genuinely cool. Now, I myself am not cool, but I have the pleasure of being surrounded by some incredibly naturally cool people. Can tell you now for free. Well, not really, because, I mean, you do have to watch ads, so it's like kind of for free. Not one of them, not a single one of them in this context would have seen someone called Violet and decided to call her Violence. There were so many other options for a nickname. Viola? Little musical number. V? I'd even take V. That makes sense. V for Vendetta is topical, I think. Violence? Come on now. Be so for real. And then obviously when they're doing their little training thing, Dane has to pipe up because famously cannot shut his mouth. And he says to Xaden, because Xaden's really grilling her physically, I think she's been taught enough for the day. And then Xaden just completely ignores him and stays looking at Violet and goes, he always that overprotective? It's good for him. At this point, it is important that you remember that Basquiat is first and foremost a school. I know that they seem to be doing a lot of just random trying to kill each other, but they do have other things on the curriculum. Importantly, because Violet is so big-brain, smarty girly, she's doing amazing in her other classes, like war tactics training, and like the history class. I think those are the only classes that you see her take in the entirety of this book. But she, obviously, because she's super smart, allegedly, is smashing those classes. Now, who isn't smashing those classes? Rhiannon. But what is Rhiannon smashing? Other people's faces. Yes, that's right. Rhiannon is really good at fighting. And she's also a lesbian. I don't think that's relevant to the story at this point, or at any point. I'll be honest, her being a lesbian does just feel like it was thrown in there. Like I just did then. I feel like Rebecca Yarros wrote this book and then realized right near the end, she was like, oh, shit. Oh, there's no gays. Yet another book recap where I have to ask the question, where are the gays? Okay? There is one, and I do get the feeling that was an afterthought. There's not a lot of meaningful representation in these books, so I am giving up hope slightly that there will ever be. I mean, that might be unfair. I think she has a relationship issue with her girlfriend at one point, but it's solved in about one line of dialogue, so I don't think that it's really a substantive part of her existence. Anyway, Rhiannon and Violet end up kind of forming a little alliance where Violet teaches her how to be good at like reading, studying, I don't really know. And Rhiannon teaches her how to fight. That's kind of their little thing. Violet does have friends, by the way. She starts becoming friends with Sawyer and Riddick, who are other members of her squad. But when we're talking about like secondary characters, there is a big divide. Even though they're all in the same squad, it kind of feels like, you know, at a wedding, you have like the bride's side and the groom's side, and they only ever meet to kind of sleep with each other. It's kind of like that, except instead of having sex, they keep fighting each other on mats. Violet's side of her secondary characters, Riddick is mainly just comic relief, and he only really gets to talk when he has a single joke to say or something a little bit sassy. And I'll be honest, he carried this book. He probably had about 8 lines. He is still the most memorable. Then you have Rhiannon and you have Sawyer. They kind of feel like they're only there because like an editor went to Rebecca and was like, hey, Miss Becky, she's not passing the Bechdel test, babe. She needs friends. You're gonna have to write in some friends, because at the moment, the only part of the story that really feels relevant at all is when she talks with this man, or about this man, or looks at this man. Pretty much the whole book doesn't exist without this man. And I think part of that is not necessarily a fault of Rebecca, because you do find out at the beginning of the book that it's narrated by a scribe called Jezenia. We don't really know why the book was written, other than the fact that it was written as a kind of like a historical account of these two, which makes it really funny when you find out that they start having sex later, because this is not obviously her POV. It's written as her POV, but it isn't. It's an account by this woman, which means that she is basically just writing fanfic on AO3 at this point, which might be why most of the story feels like it doesn't really exist until she talks to Xaden. But then I also don't really understand how most of the story happens if it's written in her perspective. Because, like, how does she know that Rhiannon's having girlfriend problems? How does she know that the conversations that these three had when she wasn't even there? I doubt Violet, in the middle of a war, which, spoiler, is coming, in case you hadn't guessed. I doubt she was like, oh, Jezania, my scribe friend, did you know that Rhiannon had a fight with her girlfriend? But yeah, anyway, so Violet does have friends. It's just they don't really feel super real. I know none of this is real. I know it's a book. This is what I mean about the world building. But it could also be because the entirety of Fourth Wing is a fanfic written by this one scribe, Jeznia. So who knows? Anyway, moving back to the plot. Which I am gradually losing. Violet she's smashing all her tasks thanks to her training with Rhiannon and some help from Xaden. She's doing well in school. Okay, she's number one student in the murder college as far as we're concerned. Everyone begins training for something called the Gauntlet. Now, the Gauntlet is essentially an obstacle course, a bit like Ninja Warrior UK or US for our global viewers, except instead of having a pool underneath you to fall into if you misstep, on the Gauntlet, if you fall, you do just die. Yeah. Fall to your death. Now, I'd like to take this point to remind you that this is a school. This obstacle course, this death trap, is on school grounds. Okay? And they wonder why they don't have enough soldiers to protect the kingdom. Genuinely, Ofsted would be fuming. They'd be getting a needs improvement score from Ofsted. Now, this is a little task for you, okay? As I describe this thing, I would like you to try and picture it in your mind's eye, unless you have aphasia, and then that might be quite hard. Because throughout the entirety of this book, I could not. Genuinely have never been so confused about what I was supposed to be imagining in my mind, other than when I was told to describe what I thought the parapet looked like. Word parapet was new to me, I'll be honest, until I saw a picture on TikTok of what the parapet was. Did not have a clue that it was just a big, long, sideless bridge. So what we're going to do is I'm going to describe every single step in this obstacle course, and you're going to try and imagine it, okay? And then at the very end, I'm going to show you a drawing that my very talented friend Lily did to visualize the gauntlet, and you're going to tell me if it looks similar to what you imagine. The gauntlet is described as being on the side of a cliff or a hill or something. It's kind of like up a mountain's edge. I'm pretty sure. I might have just made that up. No, I'm 90% sure that that's not. I'm not just lying. It's in the side of a mountain. You're stood here. You're looking at the gauntlet. Okay? Obstacle 1 is a 15-foot long rotating log. Wibble wobble your way across that. The second obstacle is a set of 4 granite pillars, right? You got to jump across. The third obstacle is a large wheel with one entrance to its interior, and then the wheel rotates counterclockwise. I think you've got to try and outrun it or get out of it. I'm not sure. You're basically just a hamster in a ball. Speaking of balls, fourth obstacle, set of giant iron balls. They are said to be slightly too large to cling effectively to. The gauntlet has balls that are too big to grab. After the iron balls, there's a set of 3 textured metal cylinders. A person must hang from each of them and then swing close enough to transfer to the next. After that, there's another set of pillars that are made of iron and, much like me, are unstable. If you make it past the wibbly wobbly iron pillars, there is a set of 7 large logs. They are about 3 feet in diameter and counter-rotate. You got that? Okay. Now, the second to last obstacle is something called the chimney, which is very much what you imagine. It looks like a chimney. The standard way of getting up the chimney is to press your back against the chimney and to lift your legs up and just kind of climb your way up. Like reverse Father Christmas. Instead of going down and dropping presents, you're stealing them and getting out. It is said that because of the dimensions of the chimney, those of smaller stature might find it impossible to climb up. God, if only I knew anyone who was famously really small and dainty and little. The last obstacle in the entire gauntlet is a wooden ramp that curves back on itself. I was imagining like a skate park, you know, those things that go up, except like it's giving death slide. You ever been on a death slide? It's like one of those, except going down and inevitably forgetting to tuck your elbows and getting really bad friction burns. You've got to run up it. Again, not easy for the girlies who are very tiny. Okay, that's everything in the gauntlet. It's all done. What does that look like to you? Really picture it, okay? Because this is how the gauntlet looks visually. Now I've just reread all of the things that are in the gauntlet. You're telling me they have the technology to carve iron balls into a mountain, but not the brains to work out that maybe killing off loads of kids if you need people to protect your kingdom is probably not the best way to do it. Incredible. The way that they train for the gauntlet is by looking at it and then giving it a go. And then they kind of train different things relating to different aspects of the gauntlet. Obviously, because Basquiat is Ofsted's worst nightmare, people do actually die when they try and train on the gauntlet. Violet, when she gives it a go, cannot do the last 2 parts of the gauntlet because she is, of course, say it with me, so small and dainty and tiny and little. Of course, of course. Now, Violet starts freaking out because passing the gauntlet is in completing the entirety of the obstacle course is very important at this part in the book. On presentation day, which I'll explain what that is in a minute, every single member of your squadron must run and complete the gauntlet. If they don't complete it, as in they die, RIP, have a good one, sorry you didn't get a dragon, or they just fail to complete it, or they just wussy out and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it, I'm scared. The squadron as a whole gets penalized. Every squadron gets timed with how fast each one of their members completes the gauntlet. And the squadron with the fastest time gets presented to the dragons first on presentation day, which obviously is great because that might mean that the dragons choose you, babe. So the worse you perform at the gauntlet, the worse position you get when being introduced to the dragons. And the justification for this in the book is essentially dragons like fast, strong people. And so naturally, if you've completed the gauntlet the fastest, you are, I hate to say it, but the strongest, babe. It's given Gojo. Now Violet starts freaking out. She's doing the whole, I'm panicking because I'm gonna lose my job. And truly she's right, because if she slows down her whole squadron because she fails the gauntlet or she just can't complete it, not only does her squadron get penalized, but she's getting the sack, babe. So very sad, very stressful times. But luckily for us, Xaden gives her a big piece of cryptic advice. Xaden says, here's the thing, Sarangale. Hope is a fickle, dangerous thing. It steals your focus and aims it towards the possibilities instead of keeping it where it belongs, on the probabilities. That's right, Xaden has actually just revealed himself to be #1 in maths class. He knows his probabilities. I don't think they teach maths at Basquiat, but if they did, #1. Anyway, he continues by saying, you're supposed to focus on the things that can kill you so you find ways not to die. The right way isn't the only way. It is giving Harry Potter and the Triwizard Tournament. You know, when they got those super vague clues and I was just kind of like, okay, I get it, but also, are they supposed to be letting the kids die here? And the answer, big government, stop trying to get me. Hi, Mum, I'm filming. Are you all right?
Yeah, what are you filming?
Well, I'm filming me Fourth Wing recap, Shaz. If I'm in a life or death situation where I need an answer, a solution, and I cannot figure out that solution, and then a man comes up to me and instead of providing me with an answer that he knows, by the way, he has the answer, he gives me the vaguest clue in just completely the least helpful way. Why does he talk about hope? This is the one time you're allowed to mansplain. You've just missed your golden opportunity. It's gone now. It's gone. Violet figures it out and she barely manages to complete the gauntlet. And I'm talking scrapes by the skin of her teeth, babe. She basically cheats. Yeah, that's right. That is what she does with Xaden's incredible piece of advice. She manages to climb up the chimney by using a rope that was meant for another obstacle. She like pulls it along and uses it to like leverage her way up. I'm not gonna lie, hate to be that girl, but if I had just ran the gauntlet and done it, completed it, and I turned around and saw that tiny little woman cheating on the very same obstacle course that almost claimed my soul, my life, my bloodline, I would be calling her out for cheating. And one of Dane's boys does. Rightfully so, I hate to say it. And she manages to get out of the cheating allegations by using her knowledge of the codex to basically flex that she is allowed legally. She's legally blonde, legally grey. if you will. I think her team get a time penalty for her cheating, but she doesn't get thrown to the dragons for it. Well, she does, but she's consenting. Her team come in 11th place after her penalisation. Not a great score. However, considering she literally could not complete this gauntlet the day before, we'll take it. Liam completes the gauntlet. Easy peasy. I think this is the first time I'm mentioning Liam, but Liam's a really nice guy and he's really good at everything. And he's blonde. So you know that he's not at any point going to be her love interest. Now, field leader Garrick, everyone say welcoming Garrick. His official title is field leader. He is Xaden's right-hand man. Xaden being wing leader. He is the field leader. And he then turns to our boys and girls. I don't think there's any non-binary characters. He turns to them before their dragon presentation, which is not a PowerPoint on dragons. No, it's where they have to walk in a line through a field of dragons and hope that the dragons don't kill them. Anyway, you're being presented to the dragons like pieces of rotisserie chicken. He tells the kids, hey babe, stay pretty quiet, think good thoughts, because dragons can smell fear, and do not approach them. Like, barely even look at them, because if you look at them the wrong way, dragon might kill you. It might. Violet is then reminded by Garrick that bonding with a dragon is fatal if it is not consensual, which is a great reminder that consent is key. Even cross-species, you know? Is that going to make it sound like I'm pro-bestiality? I hope not. So, after that little pep talk from Garrick that says that essentially if they do anything, the dragons might kill them, and if they do nothing, the dragons might just kill them anyway, the girlies are freaking out, as you would. So, they're walking in a straight line. Yep, this is visual representation out there, yeah? Where's my Oscar? Violet is in front of Rhiannon, and they're like, how do we calm down in this very tense situation where we're walking in a straight line in front of a field of dragons? Yeah, and the dragons are just chilling, okay? Dragons are just walking around this field. Most of them are led down, and there's just this line of humans, like a little row of ants down the middle of this field. So, Violet's in front of Rhiannon, short for Rhiannon, catch up. Yeah, and they decide, how do we calm down? I know. Let's talk about family. You know, the family we might never see again if we look at a dragon the wrong way. And there's a guy in front of her called Pyor. Pyor is a little bit arrogant. He's a man. And I think he says something about a dragon, about how he's so great and cool and they should all love him. And then a dragon quite literally torches Pyor to death in front of Violet. So he just goes nuclear right in front of her, just pile of ash. He was there, no more. So Violet is just kind of staring at this puddle of a man, this pile of ash, and she's just like, oh, well, better just step over that. Could you imagine you made it through like 3 months of this deadly school? You completed the gauntlet, and then naturally, because you've survived all of that, you got a little bit of an air of confidence about you, okay? You're a little bit cocky, because you know, you're getting a dragon, and a dragon looks at you and decides, nah, don't like that. Don't like your attitude.
Death.
I just think that that's so soul-crushing. You made it through all of that, and then it was your personality that let you down. It's not even your physical capabilities, babe. You are just an unlikable person. That's devastating. Violet's walking along, and at this point, 2 dragons come around her. 2. They come and they have a little sniff. They're up her and they're like... It's very much giving the chosen one at this point. Turns out it's not because she's special. It's because she's wearing the corset armor that Sister Mira gave her, which is made of dragon scales, which smells like Mira's dragon. So the dragons are sniffing her like, why do you smell like dragon? Now, I'm not being funny. If I were a dragon, that would immediately make me think that she's either eaten dragon or skinned a dragon. So I'd be torching her. Be lighting her up like Guy Fawkes tried to do to Parliament on November 5th. Now, I have seen a fan theory. There are many about this book, as I'm sure you can imagine. I've seen a fan theory that someone believes that Violet is a dragon shifter, which means that she is actually just a dragon. By the way, this is not canonical magic. Like, this is not something that has been said to be canon within the realm of this universe. No one has been a dragon shifter before. Well, I'm not sure that exists in this world. This theory came out of completely left field. But anyway, the evidence that they cite as to why they think Violet might be a dragon shifter is partially because of this scene when the dragons sniff her. They say that they're not sniffing Mira's corset, they're just sniffing Violet. Because the girl she just stinks a dragon. Another piece of evidence that they cite is that because her bones are all like squishy and her muscles just keep popping out, it means that maybe she'll just shift into a dragon. I'm sorry, the idea that this girl, her bones just keep dislocating is because they're supposed to become dragon wings. Like, I'm just trying to envision it. And it's really funny. She's just dislocated her shoulder and then it's just practice for when her arms morph into dragon wings. That's what's happening. She gets sniffed by 2 dragons. They figure out she's wearing dragon scales and then they bugger off. Violet's alive. She made it out of the presentation. Congratulations. The whole team, they all make it out alive. Woo! Our protagonist lives, shockingly. Unfortunately, another team does not. The entire squadron gets got. They all go up like Parliament should have, to be quite honest. A little side note, they are told before the presentation what types of dragon will be appearing at presentation. Now, there are red dragons, orange dragons, green dragons, blue dragons, black dragons, but they are told that no black dragons wanted to bond this year, and they like never do. And I think the same is true of blue dragons. So there were none of those at the presentation. Another thing we find out through one of the history lessons and like the dragon classes is that every year there are less dragons to bond with riders. And this is partially because the dragons don't want to bond with them, or because maybe there are just less dragons. We're not really told, because dragons don't really share anything with their riders about dragonkind. There's kind of like this knowledge embargo where dragons get all the information about their riders, but riders don't really get all the information about the dragons because they're not really allowed to tell you. And we'll get more into that in a bit. But we find out that this year it's extra competitive for the cadets who want to become riders because there's only 100 dragons to bond with over 160 cadets, which is not looking good. Those of you who can do maths means that that's like a lot of people without a dragon. I unfortunately cannot do maths, so I will not be calculating the percentage, but feel free to do that in your own time. But what did make a random shock appearance was there was a very cute little golden feather-tailed dragon. The tail is important here because each dragon, there are different colours, but there are also different tail types, and that says something about the type of dragon it is. It is the tail and the colour that make the dragon. So when they see this little golden feather-tailed dragon, they're very confused because, one, I don't think they knew that dragons could have feathers on their tails, because all the other ones are like big scary tails for the dragons. Very dainty. It's giving cute. She's cutesy. It's giving very demure, yes indeed. And then one of the dragon experts at the school, like one of the teachers, gets very excited over this golden dragon because they didn't know dragons came in gold, and they didn't know they could have feather tails, I'm pretty sure. Right, now we are at the point in the book where we actually get dragons. Very cool. So this part is called the threshing, right? We keeping up with all the new nicknames, the new vocabulary. Now the threshing is kind of like Pokemon Go, if the Pokemon were dragons, okay? All of the first years and anyone without a dragon goes into a big woodland and tries to find a dragon that will bond with them. Yeah, it's hide and seek dragon edition. Now, this is a very important piece of information. Only people trying to bond with a dragon are allowed to enter into this woodland at this point. No one else, no member of their squad, no team leaders, no teachers are allowed. It is only the dragons and the first years. So what happens, you ask, if by chance you did not go to Specsavers and could not find a dragon that liked you enough to bond with you? You have to retake the entire first year and try again next year. Sincerely, I would not be doing that. We are kind of told that you find the dragon that's meant for you, and if you do find a dragon that doesn't want you, it might kill you, number one, because that's the thing about dragons. You never know. You never know. But also, it might just fly away from you, which would be so mortifying. Could you imagine? You've made it through all of that, babe. You get to the woodland, you find a dragon, you're like, wow, I'm going to be a dragon rider. And it looks at you and it's like, Nah. Now, this is very topical because we are told that there aren't enough dragons to bond with the amount of first-year riders that want dragons. And this does kind of make you realise that maybe the reason that big government are killing off so many potential riders is just because they don't have enough dragons for them. And room and board must be quite expensive in this school. So if they just had a bunch of first years retaken every year, crikey, you'd be 33 before you got a dragon. Could you imagine? So you just have loads of people retaking the year every year. Your first year cohort every year would be massive. Could you imagine paying room and board for a 33-year-old? Violet starts freaking out because she doesn't feel a pull to any of the dragons. So she starts thinking, right, I am clearly going to have to retake the year here. Humbling. Because her sister Mira and her brother Brennan, rest in peace, they are very much talented dragon riders, or were, sorry. Sorry, Brennan. If she not only is meek and mild and a bit dainty and small, and does not bond with the dragon, could you imagine how embarrassing that would be? And can you imagine how embarrassed big government would be? I reckon big government would kill her off herself if she didn't bond with the dragon. So that's got to be weighing on Violet's consciousness at this point. They are told before the threshing, in like the pre-game of the threshing, that they have to go off to find the dragons on their own. You're not allowed to group up, you have to go individually. Does this happen? Absolutely not. Now, remember at the beginning of this video when I told you that this book tends to pull themes from very popular works within the fantasy and dystopian genre, mainly books that were popular about 10 years ago. And the main inspirations I cited were like Harry Potter, particularly at the Triwizard Tournament. You've got Divergent, and of course, Hunger Games. This is the part where it starts to feel very Hunger Games, particularly with the careers, which are districts 1 to 4 in the Hunger Games that kind of band together and hunt out the weaker districts. Do you remember Jack? Jack Barlow, the man who Violet famously had by the literal balls, who professed that he wanted to murder her and then she just let him go anyway. Well, this is the part where he tries to murder her. So Jack gets a little group of girlies together and in a plot twist, instead of going after Violet directly, he decides he wants to hunt and kill the golden feather-tailed dragon. Why, you ask? No one knows. He's nasty is the biggest explanation I have for that. He's just not a nice man. Violet, being our golden good girl, silver good girl, she is like, well, I'm gonna protect this dragon. Hate to say it, girl. You're very small and dainty, and that is quite literally a dragon. Is it a baby dragon? Yes. Is it small? Yes. Is it still a dragon? You can't win a single fight against anyone unless you poison them, and you're gonna start trying to stand up for a literal dragon versus a group of men. I know that this is supposed to show that she's righteous, right? She's a good person. But the one thing that this book has been hammering on about is that she is smart, and I can tell you for free, ain't nothing smart about that decision, babe. Anyway, so Violet steps into the opening between Golden Dragon and 3 men, 3 fully grown, able-bodied men who will absolutely body her, but she does it anyway. And she's protecting the weaker dragon. At this point, it's probably worth mentioning that all 3 of these men have swords. Not that they would need them to murk this woman, but they have them anyway. I'm pretty sure she has some daggers, and I think she throws one and it hits Jack in the shoulder. He's not chuffed about that. So he's like, yeah, you know what? I was gonna kill you before, but now I'm gonna like really enjoy it. So all 3 of them get up and they're like, well, here we go, boys. And Violet's like, yeah, this was a smart decision. I'm gonna die now because I was trying to protect an actual dragon. Slay. So what happens in this moment where our protagonist is gonna die? She's clearly outmatched, outnumbered, outgunned. Whoever could save our girl? Could it be time for Shadow Daddy's Aiden Ryerson to make an appearance? Yes, it would. Yes, it would. Could it be an appearance which, by the way, is illegal? Because only first years are allowed in the forest. Does that make it extra hot and extra cool? Absolutely. And he's not alone. Oh no, because big boy Aiden Ryerson bought his dragon. Yeah, this is lovely lady Sigil. She's a big blue dragon and she's scary. But anyway, they're stood there and they're like, hey bullies, I'm gonna ask you to reconsider trying to murk this student and also this golden dragon. Because dragons don't really like it when you kill dragons. And if you want a dragon, you should probably stop wasting time before they all bond with your course mates. And you just have to retake the year, because that's humbling, that's embarrassing. And they're like, Still gonna kill Violet though, yeah. I've checked my watch and I've still got time, yeah. And Xaden obviously is not allowed to intervene because it's against the law. He shouldn't even be there. So he's mainly just shouting. He's just there as like an intimidating presence. He's like a bodyguard, but you can't physically do anything. At this point, Violet manages to somewhat defend herself. She chucks another dagger at one of his friends and the boys are injured. She manages somehow to chase off these men, to intimidate them enough whilst Xaden is shouting that the dragons are all leaving with their riders. He's like, oh look, another one gone. That's, you've probably got about 3 dragons left now. Jack shoots bloody murder, a look of pure death intent at Violet, as he's been doing famously all book, and then scurries off eventually. Xaden and Sigil leave. They sneak out the back, and then once she's alone with the golden dragon, this absolutely massive monster of a dragon comes, and it is, spoiler, a black dragon. The ones that famously weren't prepared to bond with any riders this year? Why, yes, the very same. I'm going to break down a little bit of dragon lore for you. Dragons can pick and choose when and if they want to bond with a rider. They have this kind of weird alliance with Basquiath and the humans, where dragons don't really need humans and they try not to really get involved in human affairs. But the Dragon Council, that's right, yeah, there is a council of dragons. They kind of decided that the humans and the dragons' interest aligned enough that bonding and letting a human ride you as a dragon was worth it, because they got magic powers, and it's explained somehow in the book. It's justified, I'm sure. And I think it's to do with the griffins on the other side of the border of Navarre. At this point in the book, you're really just not convinced that the dragons need the humans at all. And you're like, it doesn't really make any sense as to why a dragon who is described as literally being insanely powerful, absolutely massive, would let any human on top of them. Because we're also told that dragons can absolutely body griffins. So, like, you're already winning the 1v1. Like, why do you need the human? Massive big black dragon has landed next to Violet, and she's staring at it, and she's like, oh my God. And then this big dragon talks to our girl Violence through her mind. Words communicating straight via the noggin, okay? That's faster than email. And what's even more crazy is that only bonded dragons and their riders can do this. The crowd is speechless. We're all shocked. Nobody saw this coming. The main character bonds with the biggest dragon? Now, as you'd expect of our famously gifted and talented protagonist, despite knowing that only bonded dragons and their riders can communicate through their mind, Violet does not seem to understand this. She kind of just questions it for a while and is like, how is this possible? I really don't understand how this woman is allegedly this smart and yet at every opportunity is not smart. Not a single good idea has this woman had since that one trick about poisoning her competition on the mats. And that idea, I'm pretty sure she nicked from her boy Brennan. Okay, so yeah, dragons can read their riders' minds, but riders can't read their dragons' minds. They can only hear what the dragon wants them to hear. It's a one-way street, if you will. Violet does not have a license for mind reading, unfortunately. Telepathic communication is genuinely one of the best tropes that Rebecca put in this book, because the banter between this giant monster of a dragon and this basically teenage girl, at one point in this book, he genuinely just turns around and tells her to stop bleeding. He's just like, can you not? So he knows her name but refuses to call her Violet. He keeps calling her the Silver One, which, by the way, is another piece of evidence that is fueling the fan theory that she's secretly a dragon, because most other people's dragons call them by their government names, their big government names. So I guess that's the point for the dragon shape-shifting theory. So we get some fun little conversation between Violet and her dragon here. Step aside, Silver One. Yes, you. Move. You're bleeding. Stop it. Your hands are bound too. Do you bleed often? I try not to. He really just said, God, I'm sick of you already. You're just so weak and fragile. How do you know my name? And to think I'd almost forgotten just how loquacious humans are. Anyway, this dragon is called Ten, which is a nickname, which I'm very grateful for because it's much shorter than his real name, which is, by the way, Zayden Ryson, how nicknames are supposed to work. This dragon's government name is Tananak. Anyway, there's this really cool line that he says where he talks about like his bloodline and his parents. And he's like, yeah, my name's Tananak. But there's a lot of Gaelic words in there and I'm not trying to rage the Gaelic community, I'll be honest. I'm not trying to insult anyone with my pronunciation. So I'm just going to get Google to read it. So anyway, Big Boy 10 tells Violet, you're going to need to get on me. We're going to go for a ride. I have chosen you. You're my girl, my main girl, number one girl, silver one. And she's like, oh, Soleil, I bonded with a dragon, a big boy. So she climbs on the big dragon. He flies off. And then she falls off the dragon. Now, at this point, you know why she falls off the dragon. Can I have some audience participation, please? Why does she fall off the dragon? Because she's so small and dainty and tiny and little and weak, of course. Yeah, she falls off the dragon because she's got no thigh muscles. Because she's very small. Yeah, she's a small girl. Bonded with big dragon. But yeah, Tarn saves her. And then he proceeds to say this. You're making us look bad. Stop it. Now, get back in your seat and actually hold on this time, or no one is going to believe that I've actually chosen you. I still can't believe you've chosen me. Basically, he just tells her to do some leg workouts and shut up, which is great, because I've been basically saying that for the entire book, babes. Although, I don't know if leg workouts are going to help her, because she allegedly has a literal disability. So, and we get this realization that Violet has, when he says her name and kind of says a bit about himself. He's one of the deadliest dragons in Navarre. Professor Corey's lesson. The only unbonded black dragon hadn't agreed to bond this year. He hadn't been seen in the last 5 years. His rider died in the Tyrish rebellion. Now, this is an important piece of lore. Because dragons are so old, they can have multiple riders. Not at the same time, but the idea is that one, because riders don't tend to live very long, the rider will probably die at some point and the dragon can take a new rider whenever they want. Or the rider gets old and dies and the dragon obviously doesn't because they live a lot longer than humans. And at some point the dragon will choose to take a new rider. We find out that Ten's previous rider died during the Tyrish rebellion, which, spoiler, big French Viva la Resistance Fen Ryerson started. Also, I don't think I mentioned this before. Violet's dad died of like a heart attack allegedly because he started getting heart palpitations after Brennan died. And Brennan died because Fen Ryerson, big famous Frenchie, shot him with a crossbow through the heart. Yeah, there's no coming back from that one. Tarn then says to her, we're going to have to put on a show. You will not fall. I will not allow it. And they do like this whole big scene of him like flapping his wings and stuff. Anyway, Violet's feeling a little bit insecure and doesn't really understand why he's bonded with her because she's so little and small and weak. And he basically says it's because she tried to save the golden feather tail. He was like, that was very cool of you. But dragons value strength and cunning and ferocity in their riders. None of which defines me. She's giving a little bit of pick-me energy right now. A little bit. And Tarn picks up on it and kind of like puts her in her place. He goes, please do tell me more about what I should value. One, don't speak for me. And two, don't put yourself down, girl boss. Because he follows it up with, you are the smartest in your year, the most cunning. You defended the smallest with ferocity, and strength of courage is more important than physical strength, since you apparently need to know before we land. I think that's supposed to be like the whole moral takeaway from the entirety of Fourth Wing. Hey, you can be really weak physically in like life-threatening situations, but as long as morally you're a good person, you'll be okay. Because strength of character is more important. Personally though, if I was in a 1v1 and someone said, choose your weapon, and my weapons were strength of character and a knife, I know which one I'm picking up. Okay, plot twist time. Violet also bonded with the golden feather tail. Yeah, world first in the dragon world. She has not one but 2 dragons. Just in case you thought the biggest, most scary dragon bonding with our main character wasn't enough to signal that she was in fact the main character. Yeah, she got 2 dragons, babe. 2. The golden feather tail is this one here, and her name is Adana Nurum. Yeah, so no one's ever bonded with 2 dragons, so she is a little bit nervy. And basically, when you bond with your dragon, you have to go to this separate field They love a field in this book. And you have to register your bond with like the school. All the generals are there. Everyone's kind of there just to see who bonded with who. And you have to give your name and the name of your dragon that you bonded with to this woman who's got like a big register. It's basically dragon roll call. And then we get this little scene. For the record, please tell me the name of the dragon who chose you. I lift my chin. Tarnanak. The pronunciation could use some work. And Adonaniram. Both dragons? All hell breaks loose. As you would expect. All the generals are fuming. Big government. They're not having a single bit of it. They're like, absolutely not. There are not enough dragons for all our riders. And this greedy bitch. But then they find out that it's not up to big government. Like, it's not their place to say whether or not she can bond with 2 dragons. Because humans are literally lower in the pecking order than any dragon. So the dragons have to then talk it out. So all of the dragons have to go to a big dragon meeting with the Dragon Council, which I love. And I wish we knew more about the Dragon Council. When Ten goes to the dragon meeting, he specifically tells Violet to stay close to the wing leader. That's right, Xaden Ryerson. And she's like, absolutely not. I kind of want to go see my boy Dane because we're besties. And Ten goes, girl boss, do as I said. Okay, I'm literally a dragon. Don't argue. She's in a huff. She's like, oh, all right. Before she can get to Xaden, guess who shows up? Big Dane, because Dane has not realised he's got far too much blonde in his hair to be the love interest in this story, okay? He rocks up and he tries to convince Violet to only bond with the tiny dragon. He is basically just a shill for big government at this point, which makes sense because he's a Nepo baby. Bloody Dane. He tries to convince Violet just to bond with the teeny tiny dragon because this dragon is more her size because she is... I don't know if you know this, but she's actually very small and very little and very dainty. And this, by the way, makes no sense because Dana spent the entire book saying that she needs to be protected, right? Who could protect her better than the most deadly dragon potentially ever, right? So why is this man just like telling her to just stick with the golden dragon? Well, we find out that the reason Dane truthfully does not want Violet to stay bonded to Ten is because Ten and Sigil are bonded. They're a mated pair. Tern and Sigil, the strongest bonded pair in centuries. Mated pairs can't be separated for long or their health diminishes, so they're always stationed together. Always. So what does that mean? That means that this girl is quite literally anchored to this man now. Not through really weak plot connections. No, not through secret meetings under a tree. They're now bonded by their dragon's mating bond. A legitimate reason to force them together. It's like an arranged marriage. It's great. And what we have here, guys, girls, gays, and theys, is the forced proximity trope. So now Rebecca can keep them together plot-wise without actually having to get them together yet. There are legitimate reasons for them to have to interact privately. And guess who doesn't love that? Dane Atos. He's very unhappy with this. He is like, not my Vi, not my delicate dainty girl. She can't be near Shadow Daddy Xaden Ryerson. So Vi then explains to Dane what happened in the field, including the fact that Xaden showed up. We find out that this is a very big mistake because not only is Dane Atos not a love interest, unfortunately he's also a narc. He is big, bloody narc. Xaden was there? Yes, but he left after Ten showed up. Xaden was there when you defended Adarna, and then Taryn just showed up, he asks slowly. Yes, that's what I just said. Was the timeline confusing for him? What are you getting at? Don't you see what happened? What Xaden's done? His grip tightens. Thank gods for the dragon scale armor, or I might have bruises tomorrow. Of course. Of course she might have bruises. Please, do tell me what it is you think I've done. A shape emerges from the shadows, and my pulse quickens as Xaden steps into the moonlight, darkness falling off him like a discarded veil. Heat rushes through every vein, wakes every nerve ending. I hate the reaction of my body at the sight of him, but I can't deny it. His appeal is so inconvenient. You manipulated the threshing. Dane's hands drop from my shoulders, and he turns to face our wing leader, the set of his shoulders rigid as he puts himself between us. Oh shit, that's a huge allegation to hurl. Dane, that's paranoid. I sidestep Dane's back. If Xaden was going to kill me, He wouldn't have waited this long to do it. He's had every possible opportunity, and yet I'm still standing here, bonded to his dragon's mate. Xaden's not going to kill me. The realization makes my chest tighten, makes me re-examine everything that happened in that field, makes my sense of gravity shift beneath my feet. Is that an official accusation? Xaden looks at Zane like a hindrance, an annoyance. Did you step in? Dane demands. Did I what? Xaden arches a dark brow and levels a look on Dane that would make a lesser person wither. Did I see her outnumbered and already wounded? Oh yeah, I forgot. I think Jack does actually get a sword swipe in on Violet. Like her shoulder's pretty messed up, I'm pretty sure. After she throws the dagger at him, I think he returns a blow. So yeah, she's in trouble at that point. Did I see her outnumbered and already wounded? Did I think her bravery was as admirable as it was reckless? He turns that stare on me, and I feel the impact all the way to my toes. And I would do it again. I raise my chin. Well, aware, Xaden roars, losing his temper for the first time since I met him on the parapet. I pull in a quick breath, and Xaden does the same, as if he's just as shocked by his outburst as I am. Did I see her fight off 3 bigger cadets? Because the answer to all of those is yes. But you're asking the wrong question, Atos. What you should be asking is if Sigale saw it too. Dane swallows and looks away, obviously rethinking his position. His mate told him, I whisper. Sigale called for Tern. She's never been a fan of bullies, Xaden says to me, but don't mistake it as an act of kindness towards you. She's fond of the little dragon. Unfortunately, Tern chose you all on his own. Dane mutters, my thought exactly. Xaden shakes his head at Dane. Sorengale is the last person on the continent I'd ever want to be chained to me. I didn't do this. Ouch. It takes all the willpower in my body not to reach for my chest and make sure he didn't just rip my heart out from beneath my ribs, which makes absolutely 0 sense since I feel the same way about him. He's the son of the great betrayer. His father was directly responsible for Brennan's death. And even if I had, Xaden moves towards Dane, towering over him. Would you really level that accusation knowing it would have been what saved the woman you call your best friend? My gaze flies to Dane, and a silent, damning moment passes. It's a simple question, and yet I find myself holding my breath for his answer. What do I really mean to him? There are rules. Dane tilts his head to look Xaden in the eyes. And out of curiosity, would you have, let's say, bent those rules to save your precious little Violet in that field? His voice ices over as he studies Dane's expression with rapt fascination. Xaden had taken a step. Right before Tern landed, he'd moved toward me. Dane's jaw flexes, and I see the war in his eyes. That's unfair to ask him. I move to Dane's side as the sound of whipping wings interrupts the night. The dragons are flying back. They've made their decision. I'm ordering you to answer, squad leader. Xaden doesn't even spare me a glance. Dane swallows, his eyes slamming shut. No, I wouldn't have. So what we learn in this chapter is that 1, Dane is a narc, first and foremost. He will dob you in, okay? He's a stickler for the rules, much like our girl Violet was prior to everything that's about to happen from this point on. Unfortunately, we find out he values the rules more than he values Violet's life. And this is kind of the big turning point in the book, where all the girlies who were a bit like, well, cut Dane some slack, you know, he's just trying to protect his bestie. This was the moment where they were all like, now this man was willing to break the rules, to sneak her out of the Riders Quadrant and into the Scribes, because he thought she might die. But in the face of 3 men who actually want to murk Violet, he's like, but there are rules. Sir, I'm so confused. So at this point, it's revealed that the dragons are allowed to stay bonded to Violet. They've decided it's fine. Xaden then explains to Violet that he now has to protect her, because if she dies, Tern dies. And if Tern dies, because they're bonded mates, Sigil, Xaden's dragon, will also die, which means that Xaden will die. Did you get all that? Yeah, they're in a weird murder-suicide pact at the moment. Now, you might be thinking that this information contradicts what I told you earlier about dragons and their riders dying, right? But there are a few caveats to that rule that I told you earlier. Right, so, deep breath. This video is so long. A dragon can have multiple riders, but Tan has said that his bond to his last rider was so deep that when he lost his last rider, it almost killed him. So Violet will be the last rider that he ever bonds with, because he's going to die when Violet dies. He hasn't got the strength to continue, because when a dragon's rider dies, it does affect them and they do get weaker because of it. It is also worth noting that whilst a dragon can have multiple riders, a rider cannot ever have multiple dragons, because if a rider's dragon dies, it kills the rider. Whilst a dragon may be able to survive their rider's death, a rider cannot survive a dragon death. Genuinely, if either of these dragons dies, these two are going too. I think this is the one part of the lore aspect of this book that I thought was really well done. I liked the kind of spin on the traditional bonded mate kind of trope that happens a lot in romantasy books, which is where you find out the two main characters are like bonded soulmates. And I thought that this was quite fun. I do think in a lot of romantasy books, the bonded mates, soulmates kind of trope does lead to a lot of the same plot lines a lot of the time. And so because they're in some weird four-way death bond, it adds a new dimension to it, which keeps it fun, and I like that. It was a unique and interesting thing, at least in my experience, for this book. Right, now, because Violet cannot have anything nice for even 1 single second, she becomes public enemy number 1 the minute the dragons inform all of their riders that she's allowed to keep 2 dragons, because she has 2 dragons and there are lots of cadets who other riders are friends with who do not even get to bond with a single dragon. We're very lucky that Xaden is now tied to protecting her, because we find out that it's not uncommon for cadets who didn't bond with a dragon to murder a freshly bonded cadet to a dragon, because in the first few weeks of that bond, it's open to being severed. The bond is not strong enough to damage the dragon yet. It's like a kind of weak bond. It's like a little, we're just mates kind of thing. It's casual. So if you get in there early and you slice and dice a dragon's rider before the bond is cemented, you can steal the dragon. So Violet is truly, well and truly, public enemy number 1, which is hilarious because people wanted to kill her even before they had a motive to, right? Now they got a motive. She's got 2 dragons. Get the bitch. The generals are not chuffed with this. They're not chuffed because they're aware that now Violet and Xaden are a package deal. And they are not chuffed about the daughter of one of the generals of big government being forced to be with child of the biggest rebellion in history, Xaden Ryerson. This leads me on to the point that I made earlier. I cannot for the life of me understand why this man is wing leader. Everybody hates him, especially Colonel Atos, who at multiple points throughout this book just tries to, he genuinely expresses that he basically wants this man dead. Now, if it were me, and I've said this many a time, if it were me, if I had let the children of the rebellion live, I quite simply would not let them get positions of power in my big murder school. I just wouldn't do that, right? Why is this man, son of the leader of the rebellion, a wing leader? There are only 4 wing leaders in the whole school. They're like the upper management before teachers. Why are you letting him have that much power? I don't understand. Surely you get some say in who is and who is not allowed to be wing leader or squad leader or section leader, right? Dane is the squad leader of this lot. I think he got his position through being a nepo baby, if I'm honest, because he's just a stickler for the rules and he's very boring. And the reason I say this is because I think you get to be squad leader or like section leader or wing leader by what the teachers suggest, right? They must have to approve it. Because if it was down to a vote on popularity, this little wet wipe nepo baby is not becoming a squad leader. He's just not. There's no world where this little stickler for the rules narc gets a place of respect amongst the dragon riders to a point where he gets a position of authority. There's no shot. He's nepo babied it. So that begs the question, how did he get any power? I'm baffled. Truly baffled. Violet also gets a really cool free back tattoo of 2 dragons because she bonded to 2 dragons. It's not a literal tattoo. Well, it is a literal tattoo, but it's done with magic. She didn't just like rock up to the local tattoo parlor to get 2 massive dragons. Fan art, if you will, of her 2 dragons on her back. No. When you bond with a dragon, you get a magical dragon tattoo on your back, which you don't get to pick the design of, which makes sense because it is free. Like, you can't have it both ways. That magic tattoo bonds you with your dragon and you use it to siphon some of your dragon's magic. And that's where your signet comes from. Like, your power for your signet comes from your back tattoo. So from this point on, she is officially the girl with the dragon tattoo. So the story's about to take a turn. Anyway, Violet gets a sick tattoo and Dane is like, you know what? Now is the perfect time to try and snog her. Read the room, man. Listen, okay? I'm also a sucker for a back tattoo, and hers are sparkly. I mean, but potentially trying to snog your best friend the moment after admitting that you would not break a tinsy-wincy tiny law to save her from being butchered by 3 grown men would not be the time to do that, especially when her arch nemesis just broke that law and absolutely read you to filth for it. He really is not getting the vibes, I fear. Dane moves in for the kiss, right? And Violet hits us with this internal monologue. There's no heat, no energy, no sharp slice of lust. Disappointment sours the moment. But not for Dane. He's all smiles as he pulls away. It's all I've ever wanted. Except, shit, I don't want it anymore. She's absolutely bodied that man with that. If I kissed someone and their thoughts in their head were no heat, no energy, absolutely nothing, I'm dead down here. I quite simply would, again, join a nunnery. I would not be attempting to kiss anyone ever again. How do you kiss someone and that's their reaction and you pull away and you think that went well? Like when you kiss someone, if they're not as into it as you, and it's even just a little bit, you can tell. You can tell immediately. Not that that's ever happened to me, obviously. No. So at this point, all of the rebel kids are now essentially sworn to protect Violet because they're Team Xaden and they've realised that they can't have Team Xaden if Violet dies. So they were like, yeah, we will treat this woman like a national treasure, which is very funny because all of the rebel kids hate Violet because of who her mum is. Big government obviously famously killed all of their parents and forced them into the dragon murder school. But I didn't tell you this. During those initial days of having to do sparring on the mat, training in 1v1s, she gets paired up with Child of the Rebellion and member of the Fourth Wing, Imogen. Now, Imogen proceeds to snap Violet's arm in half. And you're thinking, that's intense. That's crazy behaviour. Yeah, until you learn that actually Imogen tried to stab her first, but unfortunately Violet was wearing dragon scale armour. Yeah, the snapping the arm was the backup plan. And now Imogen has to give her like her extra rations at meal times because Violet's looking a little bit skinny. Poor girl, honestly. In reference to Violet's broken arm, by the way, Dane does take her to the healers, and the healers are like menders, I think, and they fix Violet's arms. And it turns out Violet is a regular in the healers quadrant because she's always hurt. They fix up her arm and it doesn't affect the book at all. But yeah, Imogen does actually just snap her arm after trying to kill her. After trying to commit a murder. But yeah, that ties our girl Violet to literally everyone in the squad, so I'm going to do that. I don't know if I can do this anymore, guys. I think I'm losing the plot. Now the threshing is done, I'm going to break down the types of dragons and which dragons bonded with who after the threshing. Ready? Okay. Black Morningstar Tail. Rare dragon. If we were to refer to them in Pokemon terms, this is a shiny dragon. This is a shiny, rare dragon, okay? And they're massive. Black Swordtail. This is a dragon called Kodak? Can we put in a Google Translate of how to say this?
Kodak.
This dragon is scary, big dragon, and he is bonded with General Melgren, who I haven't mentioned at all, but he's a legend amongst big government, and so is the dragon that he rides. Black dragons are first and foremost the rarest type of dragon. They are the biggest dragon, and they are very smart. They're known to be the planners amongst the dragons. The Golden Feathertail is another very rare, very shiny Pokemon type dragon, but very small. She's a small girl. I don't think anyone has seen a Golden Feathertail in ever. Blue Daggertail. In this book, the only blue Daggertail that you see is Sigil, which is Xaden Ryerson's dragon. She is known to be absolutely ruthless, and she's a big girl. I think she's the third biggest dragon in the book after Tern and General Melgren's dragon. Green Daggertail. There are 2 riders with this type of dragon in this book. You've got Mira, whose dragon is called Teen, and then you have one named Thurge, who is bonded with Rhiannon. Green Daggertail dragons are generally considered to be quite reasonable. They're the sensible ones amongst the dragon kind. Red Daggertail. The red Daggertail that we meet in this book is known as Day, and Day is a dragon that bonds with Liam. Red dragons are generally known to be hot-headed and quick-tempered. Then we've got a brown swordtail. In this book, the only brown swordtail that we meet is called Atrum, and it bonds with Riddock. Then we've got the red swordtail, and there are 2 of these types of dragon. First one is called Slilsig. This dragon is bonded with Sawyer. Other red swordtail is called Kath. Love that name. Top 10 dragon names. Kath. And this dragon is bonded with Dane, and they've been together for a year because obviously Dane's the 2nd year. There's also mention of an orange Daggertail in this book, Cladith, and this dragon is bonded with Amber Mavis, who I don't think I've mentioned and is not on the board, but she exists. She's the one that tries to get Violet dropped for cheating during the gauntlet. Valid, but we don't like Amber Mavis because of it. Orange Daggertails are known to be unpredictable, so we're skeptical of this dragon. There is also one brown club-tailed dragon in this book, which is known as Fuil, and that dragon is bonded to a character called Soleil. I spat on my mic, my goodness. Clearly I'm frothing at the bit about these dragons. I love these dragons. Oh, fun little side note, if you translate the dragon names from Gaelic, you get a little hint as to what the character's signet might be when it manifests. But I'm not gonna give you any spoilers. That's homework for you, babe. Big murder boy Jack has also bonded with a dragon. Boo! Can we get some boos in the comments, please? We all hate Jack. Obviously, because he's a nasty man, you have to assume that the dragon that he bonds with is also nasty, which is true. We also realize that one of Jack's groupies did not bond to a dragon, and that cadet is called Orin. Remember that name? Might be important in a minute. It's also worth noting that Dane friend zones Violet because she doesn't explicitly tell him that his kiss was giving dead fish. She kind of just leaves it and they get interrupted. So he, like the next day, friend zones her. Could you imagine you kiss a man and it's doing nothing for you? And then the next day he friend zones you. His reason for friend zoning Violet is even funnier. He friend zones her because it's frowned upon for them to have a relationship because he is a 2nd year and her section leader. So he breaks up with the girl of his dreams because rules. She then has to tell this man, respectfully, with respect, sir, with all due respect given, I am just not that into you, so it's just not a problem anyway. Oh, listen, I know we don't like Dane, but that every time I think about that, it just makes me feel so uncomfortable. That is so funny. Dane gets annoyed at Violet because she keeps falling off her dragon, and then Ten threatens to eat him. Cannibalist king. Wait, it's not cannibalism. That's not human. Dane then says that he doesn't think that Violet is good enough to survive the year, which I think he says mainly because he's a bit angry that she just absolutely bodied him. And then she has a little bit of courage. She has a sassy moment here with Dane, which has been a long time coming. Long time. And I'm saying long because look how long this book is. Look how long the recap is. It's been a long time coming, okay, that she's had to come back to this man. Let's get one thing straight, Dane. The reason we'll never be anything more than friends isn't because of your rules. It's because you have no faith in me. Even now, when I've survived against all odds and bonded not just 1, but 2 dragons, you still don't think I'll make it. So forgive me, but you're about to be some of the bullshit that this place cuts away from me. Get him, girl! This man was so gagged, no comeback. Genuinely no comeback. Okay, now remember when Xaden told Violet that because she bonded 2 dragons, that was going to make her public enemy number 1? Well, she actually gets very nearly murdered in the next chapter. Our girl Violet's having a dream, and I believe it's a dream about her father, scribe father, who told her things that no one else seems to know. Crazy. Big brain man. But is dead, so. So Violet wakes up because Tarn starts screaming in her mind that she needs to wake up. And she does. She wakes up. And what does our girl boss see? Our weak and fragile, dainty little girl boss. She sees 5 people in her room with knives ready to slice and dice the girl. Yeah. Yes, she does. Not a great sight to wake up to, I'll be honest. Can't say I'd enjoy that. There's 5 unbonded cadets in her room. Not good. Not good. And what she realises is that one of those unbonded cadets is none other than Jack Barlow groupie, Oren. That little weasel. But what Violet very quickly realises is that there's not just 5 unbonded cadets in her room. There's actually 6 people in her room, but one of them is a bonded rider. And the second Violet wakes up, they hightail their ass out of there. Now everyone at this point in the book is looking around like, why would a bonded rider try and murk off our girl Vi? Are there any bonded riders who've had historic beef with our girl Vi? And the answer to that is actually yes, of course. Almost every single rider that we've met at this point has had beef with Violet. So it doesn't really narrow down the options there. We'll come back to that person in a minute, but essentially what we figured out here is that the bonded dragon rider helped the unbonded cadets get into Violet's quarters to murk her. So there's been a conspiracy of some sort, and not the kind that our boy Fen would enjoy. Anyway, they start dogpiling on Violet, as you would expect. Someone tries to stab her and like punch her, but she's wearing a dragon scale corset, so I think her ribs remain intact. I say I think because she is so weak and dainty, you just never know. Oren realises that she's wearing armour, so can't stab her in any vital organs, so he's like, I know, I'm a genius, I'll just choke her out. I will just throttle the girl to death. I know it's not appropriate to say, but that is quick thinking. Good job, Oren. Good qualities for a dragon rider. Now, Tana's in Violet's head, giving her the pep talk of the century. He's telling her, hold out, you can do this. 1v5, Silver One, you can. Just hang in there. And Violet is not completely convinced by this pep talk, given that, of course, she is famously so weak and dainty. But Tana's trying anyway. He's trying to convince her that she can do it, because who's on the way? None other than our boy Xaden. And why is Xaden coming, you ask? Well, because Tan has told Sigil, who has told Xaden, that Violet's about to die. And if Violet dies, of course Tan dies. And if Tan dies, Sigil dies. And if Sigil dies, Xaden dies. And he is just not about that. Unfortunately, Xaden is a slowpoke, and Tan's motivational speech aren't as strong as Oren's fingers. Because Violet does start to die. And we get this little moment where Violet realises she's gonna die. And then, of course, you remember that Violet Sorrengail's plot armour is stronger than a dragon scale corset. Of course she doesn't die, babe. You know why? Well, she doesn't die because it turns out this little tiny little dragon can stop time. Yeah. Of course she can. So Adana actually has a magical power where she can stop time, which is very convenient for the plot. Anyway, because Adana screens mine and she's very baby girl, she stops time and she's like, well, Violet, you can't die because you're mine. I chose you. You're not allowed to die because I picked you. And that's kind of iconic, truly. But because she has stopped time, of course, Xaden manages to get there before Violet gets D-worded, and he kills them all. He uses his shadows to just slice and dice. All except Oren, who Xaden realises is the one who tried to murk Violet directly by choking her, leaving purple bruises on her neck. And he's like, I'm going to save you for myself as a nice little treat. And he gets the dagger out and he slits the man's throat. It was really giving enemies to lovers. I loved it. Violet and Xaden then have this nice little catch-up. This weirdly sexually tensioned catch-up, by the way. Listen, I know people say when you go through like life or death situations, your emotions are heated, and so, you know, things can happen. But when it's written down that this woman has genuinely got marks, handprints from strangulation, from an attempted murder, blossoming on her throat, and all she can think about is having sex with this man, It is a little bit jarring. It goes from trying to stop a murder to Violet being like, well, you come over here and murder something else, baby boy. Diabolical. But anyway, the scene is pretty spicy. Lots of sexual tension, as you'd expect from a scene following an attempted murder. His gaze shifts back to my throat and narrows at what I imagine has to be a purple imprint of a hand. I should have killed them slower. I'm fine. I'm not. His focus snaps back to my eyes. Never lie to me, he says with such ferocity that I can't help but nod in promise. It hurts, I admit. Let me see. Is that a request or a demand? Your pick, as long as I get to see if that broke your ribs. I turn my back to him, but I can see his face in the long mirror as I shrug out of the billowing sleeves of my nightdress, holding the material above my breasts as it dips in the back to my waist. You'll have to... I know how to handle a corset. This little piece of dialogue tells us two things. One, that Violet sleeps in her dragon scale corset that Mira gave her. Very smart. Which means that she cannot be stabbed in the belly multiple times by people trying to do a Julie Caesar. A little Brutus moment, if you will. Second thing, and arguably the more important thing that this piece of dialogue tells us, is that Xaden Ryerson fucks. Xaden undoes her corset and we get this little description of what he looks like whilst he's doing that. His jaw flexes once, and something that reminds me of raw hunger filters down his expression before he locks it down. He wasn't lying. He absolutely knows his way around a corset. He checks her ribs. She's a little bruised, but she's all right. And then he laces her boots up for her. I love an act of service. It's my love language. You have to remember, at this point, they are still pretending they hate each other, which makes it even funnier. And despite all this insane sexual tension, there is not actually a kiss until chapter 22. It's like 120 pages in. What page is that? I'm fact checking. Tell me. Oh my God, I opened it almost exactly on 22. Okay, chapter 22. Do you want to know how many pages into this book chapter 22 is? 263! You have to wait 263 pages for a single kiss. But my God, is it worth it? Before Xaden and Violet go downstairs, Xaden asks her if anyone else was with the unbonded cadets, because someone would have had to have let them into the sleeping quarters. And Violet confesses that yes, there was. Violet, Xaden, Tarn, and Sigil and Adana all have this little catch-up debrief before they go to breakfast. And during this, there's like a four-way conversation between this lot. And then Adana and Violet are also having a side conversation, which is completely private because these lot can't hear that because she's not their mate. During this private conversation, Violet basically speaks to Adana and is like, you can stop time, that's crazy. And Adana's like, yeah, but we don't tell humans because I'm a baby dragon. And essentially Feathertails are all baby dragons, but because the humans have never seen baby dragons, they don't know that. So they don't know that she's a baby dragon. They just think she's a different type of dragon. And when she grows up, I think it's hinted that she will lose the power to stop time because it's only a thing that baby dragons have. And then she tells Violet that she's not allowed to tell anyone that her power can stop time because baby dragons are not supposed to bond with humans because their powers are not fully formed yet. And so the human gets full access to her power as opposed to it being her power only that she lets her borrow, if that makes any sense. So essentially, when a grown adult dragon bonds with a rider, the rider gets to siphon some of the big dragon's power, and it's like a consent thing, right? When a baby dragon bonds with a rider, the rider gets unlimited access to their full power to wield it at will, which is really dangerous for the baby dragon, which essentially means, I think, that Violet has just been given the power to stop time. Violet promises to Adana that she won't tell anyone that she has the power to stop time, not even Xaden, because I don't think he knows. And she will not tell any of the humans that she's a baby dragon. Which Adana is like, yeah, I know, babe, which is why I chose you. You're a good egg. Slay. This is all going on whilst these four are having a separate conversation. And in that separate conversation, Xaden finds out that she's a baby dragon and then thinks that the baby dragon is their child, to which they both deny it and they're like, no, because he's quite upset about this. He's like, really, you had a child and didn't tell me, Sigil? That's kind of rude. I thought we were closer than that. Turns out Adana's parents died a long time ago and then those two kind of adopted her. So it's kind of like their adopted baby dragon. Violet comes down for breakfast and everyone sees all of the marks on her from being beaten black and blue. And they're like, holy guacamole. Absolutely not. Why, you ask? Because it turns out Basquiat's score for adolescent murder has rules. If you remember way back when Violet had our boy Jack Harlow by the balls on the parapet, and she quotes the Codex saying that he's not allowed to kill her unless there's an appropriate setting, otherwise he gets expelled from Basquiat's school for adolescent murder. Yeah, it turns out another rule in that codex, re murdering people, is that you're not allowed to murder a rider in their sleep. It's very frowned upon. It's so great to hear that they have rules for this kind of thing. You know, because you wouldn't want people thinking they were uncivilized. Yeah, we kill 75% of our kids, but you know what? At least none of them were unconscious at the time. Now, remember when I told you that each morning all of the cadets in the school gather in the courtyard in their squad formations to hear like announcements for the day and to do a death roll call, which hilarious. But yeah, every single morning they wake up and some geezer just stands up and tells them how many of their classmates died since yesterday. That's just like a normal part of life. Anyway, after breakfast, they have to go and do that. And then the commandment, I think is their name, is like a dude. He's the one who reads out all of the people who died and like any announcements. He gets up in front of everyone and says, last night, there was a violation of the Codex. There's gasps all around. Violation of the Codex. What do you mean violation of the Codex? Who's violating the Codex? Because Basquiat's is not like other schools, remember? Basquiat is a school with rules. Xaden then gets up onto the platform, takes over, and announces that he personally ended all 5 of the unbonded cadets that tried to murk Violet. Because that's the law, baby. He also reveals that the 5 unbonded cadets that got into Violet's room were aided by a bonded rider. That's crazy! Why would you do that? You got a dragon. Violet's like, oh God, he's gonna tell everyone he's gonna drop her in it. Xaden then announces that the bonded rider that tried to get Violet killed in her sleep and violated the Codex was none other than wing leader Amber Mavis. Now, I've not mentioned Amber Mavis much, but Amber Mavis is Dane's bestie, or very good friend, because Dane used to be in her wing. Because remember at the start of this book, Xaden moves Dane's squad under his wing. He swaps them out with the wing leader of Dane's former squad, the wing leader being Amber Mavis. Other than that, the only real mention we get of Amber Mavis is when Violet completes the gauntlet by essentially cheating. Amber's a little whiny about it. Amber initially denies this, right? She's like, well, no, I didn't. And this man, because of course, every single decision he makes in this book has to be to further the idea that he is not a viable romantic interest for this woman. He does not believe that Amber Mavis did this to Violet. And he turns to Violet and he's like, nah, not my Amber. You don't know her like I do. She wouldn't do that. And Violet has to say, yes, she did, Dane. Like, she dead ass let a bunch of people in to murder me. Like, I'm not making that up. So Daneatus, with his whole chest, turns around and basically says, I do not believe victims. And he tries to touch Violet's face to non-consensually read her memories because he thinks she is lying. Sir. It's giving, I don't believe a victim, Dane. And Violet is pissed. Violet then yanks her head back. She's like, don't you dare touch me, you little rat. You don't know me like that. Everyone is starting to beef, okay? Because no one really believes that a wing leader would risk their position just to murk off Violet Sorrengail. Everyone is in uproar, right? Because the consequence of doing this is death. And everyone's like, well, no way we're gonna let you kill off a wing leader on a false accusation. There's no proof. At this point, Amber Mavis's dragon rocks up, pissed. Because they're like, you are not going to accuse my girl of trying to do this because you're going to murder my girl. Obviously, the dragon knows that Amber did it, but the dragon's not. The dragon is ride or die, to be fair. A loyal dragon. All of Amber's squad's dragons roll up because they're like, well, you are not going to accuse our girl. So what you've got is a bunch of soldiers in the middle of a courtyard beefing. And then on the roofs of Basquiat, you've got like 100 dragons coming down just to beef with each other. It's not looking good. So Violet, being famously high IQ, she's like, we need to solve this. She asks Tan to share her memories with all of the other dragons. Now this is massive because dragons don't do that. And Tan is like, very unconventional, but Violet's like, trust me, bro. I'm a genius. Tarn shows all the other dragons her memories of Amber letting all of those people into her room and then running. At which point, all the dragons share that mental image with their riders. At this point, everyone has seen the truth. There's no denying it. So Amber turns around and she starts playing the victim. I was only doing what was right. She's weak. I was killing off a weakling so that her dragons could go to someone who deserves them. This doesn't sit well with Tarn, who takes the role of judge, jury, and executioner, and decides to just torch Amber Mavis where she stands. Turns her into a right old little marshmallow. Amber Mavis? More like Amber Mavis, she had been smarter, she would have known better than to mess with our girl Violet. Amber's dragon gets really upset by that, obviously, because his ride has just been burnt to death. But anyway, you know what? Tarn's a big dragon, so he doesn't care. He's like, you can cry all you want, babes. 1v1 me, I'll take you any day. Dragon is like, well, obviously I can't do that. Flies off. Very sad. Dane obviously feels really bad about the fact that he didn't believe Violet, but honestly at this point he's outed himself as not a girl's girl. He's not an ally. We don't like Dane. If you had any shred of hope left for Dane at this point, you shouldn't have, because she's quite literally written him to be unlikable. Following this, Xaden decides to move Liam, who is another child of a rebel, into Dane's squad to serve as protection and bodyguard for Violet. Little bit of lore on Liam. Liam, we find out, is kind of like Xaden's adopted kind of like foster brother. They grew up together in foster care, and Xaden's kind of been looking after him ever since their parents died, because Liam is a few years younger than him. So they have a very close bond. I would say it's closer or as close as Xaden's bond with Bodhi. Bodhi is Xaden's cousin, and Bodhi and Garrick are the ones that Xaden calls to clear up all the bodies of the unbonded cadets that he absolutely brutally annihilated in Violet's room. So they're ride or die. You know, because at the end of the day, it's about who'd clear up bodies, if you asked. Outside of the romance plot, it's pretty much just the same thing for like a really long time. Violet's just trying to survive various different like trials and tribulations. Shocker, she always does. She always gets a little bit bumped up though, because of course she is very dainty and fragile. Yes, she is. And trying to learn how to fly her dragon, because she's so little and tiny and weak that she cannot stay on her dragon. She can't stay seated, as the girls call it. And that's a very long plot point. Very long. It goes on way too long. She falls off her dragon like 30 times or something in a row. In a row. And I saw this video, I think it was a TikTok, of this person visually demonstrating what falling down 30 times in a row looks like. And I'm going to be so honest with you. She is not made for this school. I know she bonded with 2 dragons. But if you fall down 33 times in a row, baby girl, you're just not built for it. There is an underlying plot where she's suspicious about some of Xaden's movements. Not with women, although I'm sure he's moving mad in that department too. But like, there are some potential secrets hinted about something going on outside of the wards. And if you don't know, it's because I didn't tell you, because I forgot. Basquiat is protected by wards. We're not really given much detail about how that works, but it protects them from things on the outside, which we're assuming are the Griffins and the Griffin Riders. That we're suspecting that there are some secrets about that, but we're not really sure what that is. Most of the plot at this point is primarily just enemies to lovers. That's what we're working with here. It's just them falling in love, basically, for 100 pages. More lore time. Not only can dragons mind read, but they can also pick up on emotions and vice versa. That is a two-way street. So Violet is struggling to channel Tarn's power into a signet, and she's stressing about it because all of her besties, they're all manifesting their signet, right? They're all getting powers, very cool powers, some of them. And Violet's just there like that John Travolta meme. She can channel some of his power, but it hasn't like manifested into a signet yet. And she hasn't learned how to block him out, to separate her emotions from Tarn's and vice versa. This becomes very important because, as we know, Tarn and Sigil are mated. And a common thing for mates to do is mating, of course. And so what do Tarn and Sigil start doing? You guessed it, dragon sex. Yeah. And Violet is in the trenches. Because dragon emotions are very overpowering, allegedly. Not that I've got personal experience. Violet just starts getting insanely horned up, and she starts fantasizing about everyone and everyone, but especially Xaden Ryerson. Heat washes over me, prickling my skin and centering low in my stomach. Odd, but whatever. It's probably the side effect of the power. The Nile is a river in Egypt. Your dragons are having sex. Yeah, so she realizes she's just horned up, like on a mad one. And she bumps into some random guy. And we get this little patch of inner monologue. My vision blurs and need slams into me, robbing me of every logical thought besides satiating the overwhelming, oh, this is lust. My teeth sink into my bottom lip and I debate rubbing against him like a cat in heat while demanding he appease this unimaginable ache. But he's not who I want. He's not Xaden. Rub up against him like a cat in heat? That is feral. Anyway, she manages to find Xaden and it's presented as she's just bumped into him by accident. But like, she hunted that man down for sure. And he's smoking not weed. Of course not, because drugs are bad. But he is doing that to try and drown out the mental dragon sex. I'm not joking. I wish I was, but no, this is a genuine part of the plot where this man turns to illegal substances in order to stop thinking about dragon sex. I feel like I'm on fire. Where the hell is your bodyguard? He's in bed. Your bed? His voice is like a crack of lightning. No, not that it should matter to you. Xaden makes Liam Violet's bodyguard, so he follows her around like all the time to stop her from getting Brutused. I've got to stop referencing the one historical mass stabbing that I know. They become very close because of this, because it's like forced proximity, but remember, he is blonde, so not the love interest. Violet starts asking Xaden to help her learn to shield to block out the dragon sex, and he says, ask me nicely. To which she replies, have you always been this tall? That's so me. I'm Violet. She is me. And then Xaden hits her with no, I was a child at some point. Ask me nicely, Violence, or I'm gone. All right. Will you teach me to shield? Say please. Are you always this difficult? Only when I have something you need. What can I say? I like making you squirm. As you prefer, Xaden. Would you pretty please teach me how to shield before I accidentally climb you like a tree and we both wake up with regrets? Our woman said I'm so horned up, I'm gonna be transparently honest. Oh, I'm firmly in control of my faculties. He smiles. He adjusts his stance and brings both his hands to my cheeks, cradling my face. Close your eyes. It requires touching me? Not at all. Just one of the perks of not thinking too clearly. You have incredibly touchable skin. Girls! The enemies that love us about to kiss. 300 pages into the book. So she shields, first try, because of course she's better than anyone, ever, at everything. And Xaden goes, you are astounding. I couldn't do that for weeks. Damn it. Touching you was a bad idea. The worst, I agree, but my tongue skims my lower lip. He groans. Kissing you would be a cataclysmic mistake. Caladimus. We'll both regret it. Naturally. It. They start getting it on. It's passionate. It's fiery. It's everything you waited 300 long pages of very boring lore for. I surrender myself completely, melting into him. A flash of light burns behind my closed eyes, followed by the boom of thunder. Yeah, this snog does lead to a little bit of regret, but it mainly leads to even more sexual tension. That's right, the girlies don't get together right after this kiss. They put it down to dragon sex messing up their own emotions. Anyway, back to the plot, which, did you even remember that there was a plot at this point? Because I didn't. Violet continues stressing because she still can't channel her power from her dragon, which we find out can kill you. Because of course it can, because what won't kill this girl, truthfully? A strong gust of wind? Dane is still mad that Violet has the big boy dragon, which she can't stay seated on. And he's even more mad now because, of course, he got hard rejected. Dane just really needs to just stop being such a wet wipe. At this point, Xaden builds Violet a saddle, for Tarn, which is really like funny because it's presented as if no one in the history of Dragon Riders has ever thought of a saddle before. I genuinely cannot express how much that doesn't make sense. I'm sorry, but that is truly the most unrealistic part about this plot. Sure, I can believe that Dragon Riders exist. I can believe that this girl's hair goes white, but only at the end. Sure, I can even believe that she, being as weak as she is, somehow managed to live through death school. But what I cannot stand for is the idea that no one in the history of Dragon Riders ever thought to make a saddle. He makes her a saddle and she can strap her legs in then, and then she won't fall off her dragon, which means we don't have to watch her fall off 100 times. Very nice. That very repetitive plot point is now resolved. Also, very nice thing for Xaden to do, but he does it under the guise of, if you fall off your dragon and die, I die. So we're still in the like weird enemies to lovers transition territory. Okay, so on the curriculum at Basquiat School for murdering adolescents, Violet Squadron have to do a squad games, which is where they are tasked by the generals of the War College to essentially steal something of value from the college. And the stakes are, if you get caught, there are consequences. You've got to prove yourself as a rider, basically. And the squad that steals the thing of the most value wins a trip to an outpost, right? So essentially, you get to go on a school trip if you steal something valuable. Violet and her girls, and by girls, I mean just her squad, they hatch a plan. Obviously it's Violet's plan because she is famously very smart, gifted and talented girl. They realise that the most valuable thing is information. So they break into Violet's big government mum's office and steal her like journal. And then they present that and everyone is gagged. They're like, wow, that truly is the most valuable thing in this whole school. Incredible work. And they win. The prize is to go and visit a outpost, like a military outpost. And who is at that military outpost, you ask? Miss Mira! Yeah, she's stationed there. So we get a nice little sisterly bonding moment where Mira basically works out that Violet and Xaden are kind of a thing. And she works that out because Xaden decides to go. Sir, this is not your school trip. What are you doing here? Sigil and Ten are bonded, and Sigil didn't want to be without Ten for that length of time, and because humans answer to dragons, like dragons don't bend to orders that humans give them, Xaden had to go. Like he had to go with his dragon, even though legally not allowed. Mira's not chuffed. She was like, babes, what was the literal one thing I repeated about 8 times in the one tiny bit of this book where you have interacted with me? And Violet's like, well, you told me to stay away from Xaden Ryerson. And she's like, yeah, I did. How's that going? Ask us in about 2 chapters because they're about to have sex. There's a lot of sexual tension during this trip between Xaden and Violet. And at some point, Rhiannon, who obviously is in Violet's squad, she realizes that the outpost that they're at is actually only about an hour's flight from her family. Her and Violet end up sneaking out to go and visit her family, which is illegal because famously, you're not allowed to have any contact with your family members in the first year in the Riders Quadrant. They end up getting caught by Big Sis Mira. And in a weird turn of events, Mira not only lets them go, but escorts them, which is illegal and is kind of giving soldier who abandoned their post irresponsible decision making. But anyway, they go, have a great time. It's giving girls bonding activity. Unfortunately, when they get back, the base does get attacked by Griffin riders and the girlies have to leave. Mira sends all the kids who are on the little school trip to the outpost away. She's like, you need to go back to school because I'm not trying to make Violet an only sibling. Violet has feelings about this. She doesn't want to go. She doesn't want to leave her sister to die, even though Mira is literally a girl boss soldier who has been doing this for a long time. But she's like, I don't want to leave. Dane is in the air. Liam's in the air. They're all leaving because that's what Xaden's like, you need to get your ass out there. And Violet's like, I'm not going to go. And she tries to convince Xaden to let her stay. Xaden starts kissing her. Their second kiss since his whole I'm not that into you bit. And it's really passionate. It's feisty. Turns out he was only doing that to save time so that Tarn can come and scoop Violet up and take her away from the base. And he says the line, leave for me, is in leave so you don't die because I don't want to be without you, which is kind of a confession, not a confession. And she says, I hate you, because she does not want to leave her sister to die and be an only sibling, as Mira puts it. As they get nearer to graduation, they do something called war games, which is essentially a bunch of tactical challenges where squads kind of face off and there's different simulated war, I hate to say it, but games that the students have to complete in order to be able to graduate year 1 or graduate year 2 or 3, because they involve all of the student body. The first war game that they do is essentially like Capture the Flag, except it's Capture the Egg. Instead of the squad games where you are separated by squadron, in this one I think you have to compete in wings. You've got wings 1 to 4 and you're kind of separated by a wing that protects a fake dragon egg and a wing that has to try and steal it. Naturally, of course, the 4th wing are trying to steal an egg from the wing that bloody Jack Barlow is in. And this is where, do you remember Jack Barlow? Man who famously keeps trying to kill this woman and can't for some reason. Jack and Liam get into a fight on the back of a dragon, of course, naturally, because dragon school, and Jack pushes Liam off the dragon. Our good guy Liam falling to his death. No one is close enough to save Liam. No one's going to be able to make it. He's falling to his death and there is no chance of savior. Only we could turn back time. If only we could find a way. Good thing we have plot armor for that. Yellow Boy Dragon slows down time enough for our girl Violet on 10 to go and catch Liam before he hits the ground. Liam is saved. We're all happy. But Violet is pissed. Violet is so angry that her signet with Tarn manifests. Power crackles above me, swirls around me, wraps along my feet below me. I am the sky and the power of every storm that has ever been. I am infinite. A scream rips from my throat just as lightning splits the sky with a terrifying crack of thunder. The bluish streak of silver death slams into the tower and sparks flare as it explodes in a blast of stone. Jack falls down the mountainside in an avalanche of rock that I know he can't survive. Tarn roars, an unmistakable sound of pride. Lightning wielder. That's right, our girl Violet is a lightning wielder. And she has just committed her first murder. Jack is deceased. Woo! The girls scream. Yes. Unfortunately, Violet, being the good girl that she is, she does not take being a murderer very well. She starts having a bit of a wobble about that, even though this is a man who's actively tried to kill her many a time, and that I personally would feel no guilt for slaughtering. Dane finds out that she's a lightning wielder and immediately doesn't want her to use her power. Genuinely, what is this man's problem? Like, have a day off, babe. Can you not have an issue with this woman for 1 minute? Why are you so obsessed with being wrong all the time? And I'm not gonna lie, I do feel like this is something that Rebecca didn't do well in this book. Dane just makes nonsensical decisions as a character. His only goal in life was to protect Violet. And then at the first opportunity is like, actually, no, I can't do that. And now just doesn't want her to have any power, which goes against all of his core instincts prior to that, which suggests to me that the only personality trait that Rebecca Yarros actually intended for Dane to have was for him to just be unlikable, which means that whatever the plot needs for him to be and remain unlikable and a non-viable alternative to Xaden, he will do. Xaden and Tarn try and reassure Violet by saying that her power is the best hope that the kingdom has against the hordes of evil that seek to harm it. Girls, we're not even finished with this book yet. Can you not start on the plot for the second one? Now, naturally, if you've just murdered someone and you're a bit upset about it, the best way to get over it is to get under it. And when I say it, I mean Xaden Ryerson. That's right, they finally have sex here. Is actually pretty good. Collapse for Rebecca. However, if I have to hear that this girl is tiny and small one more time, I will. That is a threat. Anyway, I'm not gonna read out the spice because I'm not trying to get demonetized. Have you seen how long this video is? I want to get paid, sis. I want to get paid. But just for the sake of a full recap, I'm gonna give you the visuals. Okay, well, not the literal visuals. I'm not providing any visuals of that kind to YouTube. Please don't demonetize me. I'm painting a mental picture, if you will. Hardcore fruity time. There's breaking furniture, okay? Lightning is going off in the room as our girl is finding Nirvana, if you will. Xaden's shadows protect her from the breaking furniture. Shadows whip out, protecting me as the armoire frame snaps around us. Yeah, it's getting hot and heavy. And then we get this iconic dialogue. Are you ready? Oh, gods. Which one are you calling out for? Because it's just me and you in this room, Vi, and I don't share. We can tell Miss Becky has been writing for years. Okay, that's the work of genius, of smut-loving genius. Anyway, this is a completely irrelevant piece of information, but that happens to be chapter 36, page 417, 418, just for the record. And I would like to remind you that there is actually a giveaway with Bellessa in the description down below, where you could win a gift card or a free toy. Really might enhance the reading experience. Anyway, in the morning, he gets her like a bouquet of violets. Adorable. Bedside manner, very good. And she notices the scars on his back, and he won't tell her what they're for. Very sad. This is kind of the start that alludes to the secrets that Xaden has been hiding throughout the entirety of the book. And this is kind of like an ongoing theme for the rest of this book series, I fear. After they sleep together, Xaden, in classic bad boy fashion, can't be honest about his feelings. He can't admit them. And Violet is like, well, can you leave then? I'm not trying to do a casual thing here. Also, can't admit his feelings, but brings her a bunch of flowers after they have coitus. Sad, that's not giving casual. So you live in a dragon murder school, and you're telling me the one thing that you're scared of is commitment? That might be the most realistic part of this book, Miss Becky. There is an excruciating long period of time here where Xaden is just pulling the whole, don't you dare fall for me, Sorrengail. And Violet is doing this thing where she went from being a little bit obsessed with Xaden to it occupying about 99% of her brain capacity. It is all she talks about, all she thinks about. And dare I say, it's a little bit annoying, my girl. Okay, you're in a death school. Stop thinking about boys. In this part of the book, they do a lot of mind arguing. They're just beefing because obviously Xaden is like pretending he doesn't love her. And Violet's like, well, is there another woman? Why not? You clearly do, lol. And at one point they're mind arguing and Xaden shouts Sorrengail in the middle of a battle briefing. And everyone's like, huh? What about Sorrengail? And he has to bluster that he's like, oh yeah, tactically I'd get Mira Sorrengail on it because her signet helps to strengthen wards. Oh, forgot to mention, third years are taught how to carve wards. They can create new wards using runes. So like small protective wards, and Mira's signet can help to boost wards. And he successfully saves it. Good job. He basically says that he has trouble opening up, so he's like, I will give you some of the secrets, but you gotta be patient with me. And Violet's like, okay, sure, I'll be patient with you. Spoiler, she won't be okay with it. And this will be a recurring problem in their relationship that they seemingly cannot sort out for like another 800 pages once we get to Iron Flame. I'm not joking. Every single argument that this couple have from this point onwards in this series stems from this moment, where Xaden basically says, I have been keeping secrets for so long. I struggle to trust people. I struggle to open up. I'm so naturally used to keeping secrets. I need you to be patient with me. I am trying. And she says, okay. But she does not mean that. So he compromises and he kind of pulls the, well, I'll be honest with you if you ask the right questions. Very weird thing to say. Just, if you're fine with saying it, babe, just say it. Remember earlier in the book I told you that Violet got a little bit sus because Xaden was doing some weird things? Well, one of those weird things is that she caught him and a group of other rebels, which is illegal, sneaking out in the middle of the night. So she asks him what he was doing. And because she asked the right question or something like this, Xaden decides that because he loves her, he's going to be truthful. He tells her that they were sneaking out to an outpost outside of the wards called Athabine. He doesn't necessarily tell her what they were doing there, but he does say that they went. This will become important later. At this point, they're walking through the courts of Basquiath and they hear this cadet start screaming. This dragon rider, his signet has manifested, and his signet is intrinsic. Now, did I misread this word every single time it came up in this book and think that it was called intrinsic? Why, yes, I did. Is that relevant? Not really, but intrinsic? I didn't even know that was a word. And I just did not read it and did not realize I hadn't read it until I made this video and I was like, oh, it's actually not intrinsic, it's intrinsic. Intrinsic is essentially just a mind reader. And we're told very early on in the book that intrinsics are not allowed to live because they're considered too dangerous. Now you might be wondering at this point, well, Dane Atos can read minds. How come he's allowed to live? Honestly, I've been wondering why he's alive for all of this book at this point, to be honest. Whiny little man. I dislike him. Dane is allowed to live only because his gift requires physical touch. He's not intrinsic because he can't read everyone's mind inherently. He has to touch one person and then can only read one person's mind at a time and can only read their recent memories. He cannot read all of their thoughts from any point of time without having to touch them, without having to specify them. An intrinsic can read everyone's mind, all of their thoughts, which might not be ideal if you are, for example, I don't know, the leaders of a big government that are concealing the truth behind the reasons for the big rebellion. Anyway, this kid walks into the courtyard. He's going mad. He's starting screaming every single person's thoughts. So he's got bits from this person, and he's screaming. He's losing his mind. Xaden tells Violet to start reciting historical facts in her mind the way she does when she is stressed. Remember those annoying lore dumps from the beginning of the book? Yeah, the only reason I mentioned those was because it comes into play here. Now, it's very interesting that Xaden says this because I'm not sure at this point in the book, or any point in the book for that matter, Violet tells anyone that she recites historical facts to stay calm. And that begs the question, how does he know? But he tells her to do this because he realizes that the intrinsic is screaming everyone's thoughts. So he doesn't want the intrinsic to tell the entire court that they're all bloody traitors and get them all hung. And as she starts reciting historical facts in her head, the intrinsic repeats some of them. So we know that that is exactly what's happening. Everyone's realized he's an intrinsic. They're all freaking out. And so a teacher comes into the courtyard and you're like, oh, thank God a teacher's here. They're going to help the kid. And the teacher walks up to the child and the teacher snaps his neck. Yeah, he does. Yeah, the teachers at the murder school are murdering students now in broad daylight. Yeah, they are. Yeah. Anyway, big takeaway we get from this scene. 1, intrinsics are not allowed to live in Basquiat because they're too dangerous. And 2, students can not only get got by other students, but teachers too, apparently. Which it's the number of potential threats that these children are facing every day is just going up. Meanwhile, Violet has to train her signet with one of the generals because lightning wielding is an incredibly powerful skill that can literally kill enemies. And they give her the advice when she's struggling to summon it of to kind of replicate how she was feeling the first time she wielded lightning. And Tarn has this incredible line where he says, "Shall I get the wing leader?" Because remember the first time that Violet actually wielded her signet was when Xaden took her on a trip to see the band Nirvana. They force her to kind of strike lightning over and over to try and get aim and accuracy with it, and she really struggles and basically can't. Anyway, at this point, a bunch of war stuff's happening at the school. It's a war school. They do this kind of military briefing about attacks that have happened on the border of Navarre. The main purpose behind battle briefing is to inform the Dragon Riders about the kinds of battles that happen so that when they graduate and they go and get stationed at an outpost, they are prepared for their jobs, basically. By the way, I don't know if I've said this, the school is 3 years long, so they've got 3 long years of this. Now, because Xaden and Violet are trying this new transparency thing and they can communicate telepathically. Oh, did I tell you this? Because their dragons are mated, Xaden and Violet can also communicate telepathically like they can with their dragons. So they have a lot of conversations in their head after this point. Like a lot of the times when they're just arguing, they don't say a single word out loud, and this will become a funny plot point for book 2. During one of the battle briefings, Violet starts asking Xaden questions about the battle briefing, and Xaden starts transparently telling her that they are not telling the students everything. Some of the attacks that are happening on the border either aren't being told to the students like they actually are happening, or they aren't reporting the battles at all. This starts to get Violet super suspicious about the school and about big government. A little Viva la Revolution, you know what I mean? She starts getting that little French tingle in her bones to go and behead a rich person. She's doing a bit of snooping. She asks some slightly suspicious questions in like a history class, and the history teacher is like, "That's wrong, but weird that you'd say that." At some point, Dane and Violet start kind of rekindling their friendship, and he gives her a big hug. Something that he does a lot in this book is touching her face. That is a plot point. And then there's reunification day, which is where they have a big party, which the king comes to. Liam and Violet are having a good time at the party. Obviously, Xaden is not, because it's the day his dad died. At this point, Colonel Atos is seeming pretty sus. right? We're not enjoying it. He says some weird things. And one of the other generals, Melgren, also says some weird things. So we're getting a suspicious feeling. We're getting bad vibes. We also get the start of the downfall of Dane, which I say somewhat ironically because no one likes this. Like, he's not got far to fall. At this point, he's pretty low down already. But this is the night that Xaden finally admits his feelings for Violet because he's up being a sad boy on the parapet of all places in the middle of the night. He's just sat there. Violet, in her fancy dress from the party, goes up to the parapet, walks across and is like, hey, baby girl, you ready to admit your feelings now? Because graduation's going to happen in 10 days and he's going to have to leave because he's a third year and he's going to get stationed far away. So he gets mad at Violet for being risky and being on the parapet in a dress, blah, 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 and then eventually admits his feelings. Very nice. They then go to Xaden's room because how do you overcome the loss of your daddy dearest and your brother dearest? Of course, you have great sex, naturally. And Xaden tells Violet what the scars on his back are for. There are 107 scars on his back, and each one is for one of the rebel kids. We essentially find out that Xaden has taken responsibility for each and every one of the children of the rebels, of the rebellion that his father started. Meaning that he had to take physical responsibility, so he has a lashing on his back for every single child of the rebellion. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, we get the final war game. Now, for this part of the war games, all of the squadrons are sent out to different outposts to await further instructions about how the war games will proceed. And it's for like a weird stimulated war response thing, right? But you have to complete it in order to graduate, and it's involving all of the students in the school. Also, hilariously, she rocks up wearing his flight jacket, like his flying leathers, which are for visual representation. I mean, I know it's barely mentioned in the book, but Violet's actually really tiny. So when she grabs Xaden's wing leader jacket, it's really big on her, babes. It's really big because she's so tiny. She's in the leathers. She's in her wing leader's jacket. Now, if you remember, she gets some funny looks for this because Mira tells her at the beginning of the book that sleeping with people in the years above you is not a good look. So when Violet just rocks up wearing her wing leader's jacket, she's getting slut-shamed, basically, by the entirety of the riders because she slept away to safety. At this point, we find out Xaden has been sent to an outpost outside of the wards. The name of that outpost? Athabine. As wing leader, Xaden's outpost is going to be the HQ for the 4th Wing's operation during the war games. And he says he wants Liam and Sorringale to come with him. He wants to devise his own little squad. Dane is like, absolutely not. She's a first year. It's outside the ward. She's going to die. And Xaden quite literally humbles the man and says, let's be honest, she's safer with me outside the wards than she'll ever be with you inside the wards because you're a baby bitch. Zane at this point realizes that Violet and Xaden are together, gets a bit upset, a bit jealous. Violet tells him to calm down, essentially says that she's going to go with Xaden, and Dane says, I'll miss you, Violet, and then lets her go. Xaden's girl group are now flying across to Athabine. On the way to Athabine, they stop at a trading outpost. Xaden says, I'm going to keep you. You're mine, Violet. And Violet goes, only if you're mine. And then Xaden gasps and looks panicked. And he says, shit. Violet, I'm so sorry. And then a woman, a random woman, dare I say, says, is this seriously how you dragon riders spend your time? And Xaden tries to hide Sorringale at this point. She's like, what is going on? And the woman, mystery woman, says, silly to hide what's already been seen. And if the rumors are true, there's only one silver-haired rider in your death factory of a college, which means that's General Sorringale's youngest. And Xaden's trying to calm Violet down. He's like, I need you to stay calm, Violet. Xaden removes his shadows, and who do we see? Griffin riders. Violet prepares her power. She's about to toast and roast these Griffin riders. Adana's ready to eat them. And then Xaden gets Liam to restrain Violet, and he's like, hey, can you please just trust me and stay calm? Violet is fuming. She's like, what is going on? Liam's like, sorry, Violet, just give me a minute. Tarn threatens to eat Liam. Very funny. He lets go of Violet. And then Xaden turns to the Griffin riders and hits us with the line, you're fucking early. And Violet knows at that moment that this man is a traitor. Xaden has been sneaking weapons out of Basquiat and giving them to the enemies of Navarre. A terrorist just like his daddy, you ask? Kind of. Turns out that he's sneaking them weapons because they need to protect themselves. Protect himself from who, you ask? The Venin. You remember that really outlandish children's story that Violet's dad told her that no one else seems to know about or acknowledge ever? Turns out not a children's story. Turns out real. and the Venin are actively attacking the people who live outside of the Navarre wards. The Venin are like crazy, power-hungry magician sorcerer people who conjure and create wyvern, which are like undead dragons, to ride around on and attack dragons and to burn cities outside of the wards to the ground. They like suck the life force and power out of everything, like the earth, out of people. It's very scary. And Xaden reveals that the big twist of the book is that Navarre has been covering this up. Everyone in Navarre is safe inside of the wards because the Venin and the wyvern can't reach them, but they are pretending that they don't exist, and they have left everything outside of the wards to the dogs. They're like, not our problem, babe. Turns out that Fen Ryerson's revolution was to try and basically get protection for everyone from these creatures, and they did not like that. So essentially, Navarre has rewritten the history books. Also, turns out that Fen Ryerson is like a noble, like a king in his own right, making him like kind of royalty. But this will come up again later. Violet realizes at this point that Xaden exploited the early morning chaos of the war games in order to be able to assemble a squad comprised exclusively of marked ones, which means that everyone in the squad that Xaden took to Athabine is a rebel kid. Except for, of course, Violet bloody Sorringale. This is criminal behaviour. I've just confessed my love to a bloody terrorist, she's thinking. Violet is not happy. She thinks everything that her and Xaden have been through at this point is a lie, which is fair enough. Xaden's annoyed because the Griffin Riders are early for the shipment of weapons, so he's kind of mad at them. They're beefing with Xaden because they don't know why he has brought General Sorringale's child to the traitor meeting. Like, that's crazy behaviour. I would want to murk her too because she is a liability. Violet is fuming because obviously she's just found out she's sleeping with a terrorist. Not good times. Violet isn't entirely sure what to believe. Violet is confronted with lots of people telling her the same thing. And that thing is not matching up with everything she's learned her entire life. However, it does match up with that funny, weird little fairy time story that her dad taught her. Weird. Who is this father? We may never know, but suspicious indeed. Biggest thing that we take away from it as readers is that Navarre is safe as long as the wards are up. They continue on to Athabine anyway, because obviously war games. When you've just found out your boyfriend's a traitor to the nation, it's really important that you do your schoolwork immediately after that, yeah. When they get there, they find the outpost completely abandoned, which is weird. And then they get a letter from who? From Colonel Atos, Dane's daddy dearest. Xaden opens the letter and things are not going well. Essentially, the letter says that this is going to be a test of Xaden's loyalty and leadership. And it says that outpost and the people in the neighbouring villages around the outpost who are not Navarre people, they are Pomereel people, aka Griffinflyer people, they are about to be attacked by Venin. Anyway, lots to process. Violet's not really sure what to believe or who to believe, right? Because she's like, this is insane, but you are kind of a terrorist and I'm sleeping with a terrorist, but also you might be a good guy. Colonel Atos in this letter gives Xaden two options. He can either stay and try and fight the Venin to protect the Pomereel people and disobey orders, essentially be a traitor because you're not supposed to be doing that, resulting in him and the entire group of riders that he brought with him dying, or like a good boy, Xaden can take his little rebellion posse and Violet Sorringale and go to a different outpost, which is where the war games are going to start. And if they leave right now, there is enough time for them to get back into the wards, but that means they will be abandoning the Pomereel people to die. At this point, they realise they have been sent there to die. Xaden turns to Violet and asks her this. Violence, did Atos touch you after I told you about Athabine? What? Like this. He lifts his hands to my cheek. His power requires touching someone's face. Did he touch you like this? My lips part. Yes, but that's how he always touches me. He would never... I would know if he read my memories. Xaden's face falls, and his hand slips downward, cradling my neck. No, Violence. Trust me. You wouldn't. Xaden realises that Dane managed to read Violet's memories after they got back from their extracurricular trip to said outpost, and Dane, the little snitch that he is, told his father, who has now constructed a plan to strategically kill off Xaden and a bunch of the rebel kids. Little did he know, though, Violet Sorringale has now tagged along, so he's gonna kill off his bestie's daughter. And to be honest, she'd probably be fine with it because she's got a kink for executing traitors. So this is kind of the nail in the coffin for Dane's character, because we don't know whether he knows that they've been sent to die, right? But really suspiciously, when Violet decides that she's gonna go with Xaden, Dane says, well, it was nice knowing you, Violet, which makes it very much sound like this man knows that he's gonna die, all of them are gonna die, and now he's okay with Violet dying too. His whole existence plagues me. Dane essentially only needs to touch someone's face, which now makes every single time he touches this woman's face malicious. Now, if you go back and read this book with the knowledge that you now have, you get even more angry about Dane's presence. But if you can't be bothered to go and reread it, valid. I'll just give you the tally here. Dane touches her face 9 times in this book. On pages 32, 50, 92, 114, 191, 192, 203, 287, and 405. Which, by the way, does make it very funny when they kiss, because you can assume that maybe he can read her thoughts. So it doesn't make any sense as to why he thought that kiss was good. But it does change your perspective on the post-kiss friend-zoning, because between those points, Violet tells Rhiannon, BFF Rhiannon from the parapet, remember her? That her and Dane kissed and it was giving wet fish. Dane, the following day, when they meet up on the day he friend-zones her, he's all smiles until he touches her face, which suggests he read her recent memory with Rhiannon saying that the kiss was not all that, and then he was like, oh yeah, this was inappropriate, sorry, my bad, and he backtracked. But anyway, they realise that's happened, and they decide as a unit that they're going to stick to their morals and they're going to try and defend the Pomeril people from the Venin. And they stay there and have a very emotional moment where they all recognise that the coming battle will probably kill them, but they sit there anyway and they wait for the Venin to arrive. And they do, yeah, they do, riding wyvern. So Venin appear on these wyvern, start absolutely massacring people. They start having this crazy fight. Nobody knows what is going on. Everyone is crying, screaming. They're like, well, we're not going to win this. And they see that the Venin seem to be commanded by like a chief Venin who has red eyes, who seems to be controlling their movements. And he looks like a big, I think they call him like a big wizard or something. He's like the chief dude. They start wielding this insane magic. And I'm not being funny, but the Dragon Riders are getting their shit rocked. They are not in for a good time here. And at one point, the Commander Venin touches the ground and everything he touches, the life drains from. He like consumes it, which means that if you're on the ground when he touches the floor, you just turn to ash. You just disappear, basically. I mentioned very briefly when I went through the types of dragon that there is a rider named Soleil, who is a rebellion kid. Her and her dragon are unfortunately on the floor at this point, and they're not on the floor for long, because they get sent very swiftly to the afterlife. Also Malik, which is the god that they believe in this world, commend their souls to Malik. And so the wyvern are destroying the buildings, fighting the dragon riders, so they can't go and help rescue the people in the village who are getting massacred and absorbed by this weird magic dude. It's horrifying. Everything's going wrong. I'm not being funny. They start losing. Like, we're not talking little bit losing. They are absolutely getting their shit rocked. And in the heat of the battle, Violet turns around and sees Liam and his dragon Day being absolutely bodied. She tries to go to help, but it's too late, and the Venin manages to kill Day, Liam's dragon. They fall to the ground, and Violet manages to make it to Liam's side. We then have this absolutely heartbreaking exchange where Violet has Liam in her arms, and Liam knows he's gonna die, even though physically he's absolutely fine, because his dragon is dead, and a rider cannot survive without their dragon. So in his last dying moments, Liam looks at Violet and he says, "It has been my honor," and he dies. When I tell you that this death alone made an entire fandom hate Rebecca Yarros, this is the only real death that we get in Fourth Wing, and it bodied the fan base. They were devastated. So much so that many fans were begging Yarros to bring him back. Violet is trying to help, but because of the way her signet works, she's not in control of her signet. So she can't land any direct strikes of her lightning on any of the wyvern or the venin, which means that it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And Xaden is exhausting himself trying to kill all of these people who are trying to kill the innocent people whilst protecting the people using his shadows. And it's just not working out. They are absolutely outmatched. When Liam dies in Violet's arms, she gets kind of like a shift in her personality, and she's like, well, absolutely not, we're gonna win. Violet realizes that her lightning can kill venin and therefore kill wyvern, and so she starts just chucking bolts out left, right, and center, right? Unfortunately, Violet then realizes that a venin has gotten onto Tarn's back and has shoved a sword into his spine. And she's like, absolutely not my dragon. And against Tarn's orders, she unbuckles herself from the seat and starts 1v1ing a venin. This tiny, eeny weeny baby girl decides to 1v1 a mythical murder machine. Yeah, babe, you couldn't win a single fight on the mats, and you're gonna start 1v1ing a venin? Be so for real. Naturally, Violet ends up getting stabbed, and if that weren't bad enough, turns out venin laced their daggers with poison. So she's bleeding and she's poisoned. But somehow, she wins the fight. That's right, Violet Sorrengail just wins her first 1v1 without poisoning her opponent. Incredible work. And once that venin dies, all of the wyvern that venin created falls out of the sky. Turns the tide of the battle, if you will. She figures this out because she's very smart, and she tells Xaden to drop his shadows so that they can find the big chief venin and kill him. She uses Adana's gift to slow time enough so that she can land a direct lightning strike on Chief Venin. Good news, the venin falls and all of the wyvern fall with them. Congratulations, you've just won the battle, Violet Sorrengail. Unfortunately, she does lose her balance on Tarn at this point, and Violet Sorrengail immediately plunges to her death. Adana ends up using the last of her power to slow down time enough for Tarn to be able to catch Violet and save her, because remember, she's got so much plot armor. Unfortunately, our girl Violet does end up getting poisoned, and she gets very poorly and falls into a coma. Very sad, but they've won the battle at this point, so sacrifice is unnecessary, I guess. Violet kind of goes in and out of consciousness at this point. She's dying because of the poison. She's in Xaden's arm, and she overhears conversations between the marked ones that are left and Xaden, essentially saying that she's gonna die. Someone suggests they go back to Basquiath and give her to one of the menders who can fix her body back to its pre-poison state, and they're like, it's a 12-hour flight, she's not gonna make it. And Xaden hits us with there's somewhere closer we can go. And Garrick says, yeah, babe, that's not a good idea. So we're like, what do you mean? Tarn then basically threatens to eat Garrick, naturally, as he would, because Violet's gonna die. Bodhi hits us with we'll save her, but he's just reminding you of the stakes here. The stakes are, you're about to tell Violet Sorrengail a big secret, even more than the fact that he's sneaking weapons to the Griffin Riders. The final chapter of the book is from Xaden's POV, and we find out that he's really grieving Liam's death. We also discover that it has been 3 days since the battle, and Violet hasn't woken up, until she does suddenly wake up. When Violet wakes up, she's in a new place, new room, very confused. And Xaden tells her that she's actually in Orisha, which is a city that was allegedly fallen to ruin because it was destroyed during the rebellion. And he's been building up a resistance in this city so that he can make a move against Navarre. He said, yes, I am following in my revolutionary father's footsteps. Vive la révolution! Violet is like, well, how is this possible? How is it the big government doesn't know that a city that was destroyed in the rebellion is being rebuilt by a bunch of rebels? That's when we find out that General Melgren's gift for foresight doesn't work when 3 or more people with rebellion relics get together, which is why it's illegal for them to do so. So Melgren does not know whether or not they will be able to win whatever battle is about to happen at the outpost because he can't see them. So they're just going to assume they're all dead, which obviously they're not, but it buys them some time for the next little part of the book to happen without it being too suspicious. He has to explain to Violet that Adana has kind of matured in those 3 days. She's now massive and has lost the gift to stop time. We also find out that Xaden and co ended up finding a small iron box with runes all over it at the trading outpost where the battle with the venin happened, and they think that this is what the venin wanted, but they have no idea what it actually is. Violet doesn't take this well, because if you remember, famously, she doesn't want secrets between them, even though Xaden literally said, like, I will be keeping secrets from you. She starts fuming, because she's not very happy about the fact that he's lied to her about all of this stuff. Technically, didn't lie to her. He just didn't tell her, which I don't think is the same. Am I exposing myself here? Yeah, maybe. Maybe it is a lie by omission. But like, he was quite transparent with the fact that he wasn't going to be fully transparent. So I don't really think I can be mad. Unfortunately, Violet can. She's very mad. She's very, very mad. Until the point at which she realizes she was poisoned. And she's like, this is very odd. How am I alive? At which point we get the big twist, the big reveal of the book. Knock at the door. Who is it? Everyone say, welcome back to famous Big Brother, Brennan Sorrengail. He's alive. He walks into the room living and breathing, and he hits us with the line, welcome to the revolution, Violet. The girls are screaming, they're crying, they're throwing up. It's giving the scene in Catching Fire where Katniss Everdeen joins the revolution. Crazy. Is this book kind of a rip-off of that? Yes. Did I enjoy it anyway? Yes. That is essentially Fourth Wing. I've definitely missed out some things, but you can see by how long this video is, I can't, listen. I'm only one woman. If you are a fan of this book and you realize that I forgot something, please do put it in the comments. I love it when I've been filming for 12 hours and I still miss out plot points. Now, onto my kind of review part of this book. I actually quite enjoyed this book. I think as an intro to the fantasy genre, this book is great because it kind of bridges the gap between hardcore fantasy, romance, and like our traditional dystopian YA books that a lot of us grew up reading. A lot of the ideas and concepts in here are really familiar to readers who already like a lot of mainstream kind of fantasy stuff, but don't necessarily consider it to be fantasy. Like Harry Potter, Hunger Games, the Divergent series. This book heavily pulls from them to the point where you're like, oh, you straight ripped that, actually. You have just taken that, you've nabbed and grabbed. Which is fine, because writers don't own tropes, which means, like, Rebecca Yarros is just good at figuring out which tropes work for which things. I think this is largely why this book became so popular. I don't know if, in my opinion, this book lives up to the quality of writing and plot in the popular book series that it nabs ideas from, like for example the Hunger Games. This book is not competing for me with that. This book I don't think takes itself that seriously, which is part of the appeal. Some fantasy books do take themselves very seriously and that works, but it can feel very intense for new readers, and so this is very popular, I think, because it is accessible, which I love. I love when people dip their toes into a new genre because a book makes it accessible for them. The writing in terms of the romance and some of the banter between characters, particularly between Ten and Violet, is really fun. It's good writing in that sense. I think Rebecca Yarros writes banter, like sexual banter, really good, and just regular banter really well. However, I do think the world building is quite lackluster. Her lack of experience with fantasy as a whole, I feel like, is very apparent if you've read other books within the romantasy genre that do this a lot better. That isn't to say that it's bad. I just personally prefer fantasy books with better world building. I just don't fully feel immersed in the world of Fourth Wing because I don't really feel like Violet is a character outside of Xaden and their relationship, which is only further cemented in Iron Flame. There are a lot of side characters in this book that I don't really feel are fleshed out as real people at all. I don't really know why some of them exist when we could have had less characters with more personality. That said, Riddick, you steal my heart and you are very funny. I do get not wanting to delve too deep into side characters because they are side characters ultimately, but because we didn't get a lot of insight into, like, I don't know anything about Riddick. He's funny, but I know nothing about him. Sawyer is the same, and Rhiannon, I only know like she's a lesbian. That's about it. She gets a signet at some point. I'm sorry, I just don't remember. My biggest criticism of the book is that I do think there's a complete lack of nuance and explanation for motivations for literally any of the side characters, especially this lot. Like, I don't know why they are here. Truly, why would you join the Riders Quadrant when 75% of the people die? I think this is why the characters on this side, on Xaden's side of the tree, the side characters work better. All of the rebel kids feel a bit more real and more interesting is because of the fact that they're all linked by this overarching plot of them being rebel kids. And all of the generals hate them and they want them to die. And they are the Riders Quadrant because they're forced to be there, not because they want to be there. And they hate big government because of it. So they have this inbuilt character depth to them that the other side doesn't. I feel that her friendships were a bit lackluster in parts, which is partially because the world building is not fleshed out enough for me to invest in her and her friendships because the writer themselves hasn't invested in these side characters enough to make me care about them. And because I don't really care about them, when they die, it just doesn't hit the same. It makes the high stakes scenes where they could live or they could die not really land with me. Like, there were lots of times where, for example, during the gauntlet, we're supposed to be worried that one of them is going to slip and fall. And to be honest, I don't really care. I might be a bit sad if Riddick died, truthfully, because he was carrying it with his banter. But other than him being funny, is no person. I know nothing about him. And this might be controversial, but because I wasn't really invested in the side characters, I wasn't that sad when Liam died. I mean, I was sad, but I wasn't like sobbing. I was more sad because Liam is honestly kind of the only compelling side character in the entire book, which is almost a dead giveaway that he was gonna die. Whereas these lot feel like they only exist when Violet needs them for the plot. Like, Rhiannon feels like she exists for Violet to pass the Bechdel test, I'll be honest. She feels like she only exists because Yarros realised halfway through she had no gaze. I just feel like if you're gonna do a big character death, and if you're gonna be in a book that has as many I might die, we might die situations as Fourth Wing, you should at least make me care about the characters that are about to die. I think exposition in this book is really clumsily done, not just in terms of world building, but also in terms of trying to make you feel attachments to characters. Rebecca only ever gives a character backstory and growth and kind of insight into the character pretty much right as she's about to kill them off. It happens on the parapet when this random guy, I think his name's Dylan, talks about how he's going to propose to his girlfriend when he's a rider, then he falls to his death. Tragic, right? It happens again during the gauntlet. There is a girl called Aurelie, I want to say. They're not really mentioned a lot in the book, but she's in Violet's squad, and they're all having a bit of banter before the gauntlet, and Aurelie gets a bit deep about her life, and then she steps on the gauntlet and dies. So it becomes quite predictable when Rebecca is going to kill a character off, because she only gives them any real substance right before that point, which just feels like really clumsy exposition and a really forced attempt to try and make me care about the characters. I do think this is where Yarros' lack of experience within this genre kind of shows, because she's mainly written romances, and in romances, the main plot is the romance and the protagonists. In romantasy, the main plot is not really the romance. It's the world and whatever conflict is going on in that world. Like, for example, the rebellion and the war thing that's going on in Fourth Wing. The romance is kind of like a side plot to that. And because it's the side plot, not only do we have interactions between the two love interests, but we also see them build relationships with people outside of their romantic interests, which are really important, because not only does it establish our main character within the world and fleshes out the world, but it also gives us an invested interest in the characters of the story. That camaraderie between the main character and their friends is very important in world building, particularly in fantasy, because that way, when you have a death, you not only feel it as an individual because you loved that character, but you also get to see the protagonist suffer. And that suffering and loss and growth and pain and grief helps drive the plot forward. It's its own plot point, and you get to experience that with the main character, which bonds you to the main character more. And that ripple effect of a character death in a book doesn't really happen if you don't flesh out the world and the other characters. I know Sarah J. Maas has her critics, but the one thing that she does do really well is know how to weave complex friendships and non-romantic relationships in fantasy settings, which makes me invest in characters that I don't even know because I see how well they interact with characters I do know and like. For example, the banter between the Bat Boys in ACOTAR is infamous on the internet. People love those characters, not just as individuals, but as a group. If one of the Bat Boys dies, it'll be catastrophic because people value their friendships. And I just don't really feel that in this book. I honestly finished this book and got to the point where I was like, truthfully, if we'd have gotten a book about Brennan or Mira, I think that would have been more interesting. I'm sorry. And I think that's potentially because Rebecca spent too long focusing on her relationship with Xaden rather than building out her actual goals, wants, and needs. Whereas like Mira and Brennan have lore. They have interests and complexities that we kind of get a hint to. Violet feels like her whole personality is, I'm smart, but I make really stupid decisions all the time. I'm dainty and weak, but also somehow can 1v1 3 men. The entire book is Violet just being in life or death situation after life or death situation, because I'm not sure Rebecca has fleshed out the world enough to create tension without the consequence literally being death. There are lots of different consequences that a writer could choose to bring tension to a scene other than death. You know, like you really went for the most dramatic, drastic one. And the problem is because it's used so much to build tension in this book, at a certain point, you just accept Violet's just not gonna die. She's just got so much plot armor and dragon armor that it's just not gonna happen. So the only point of tension being she might die gets old very quickly. There's just a lot more they could have done. And to her credit, she does explore that, at least in part, a bit more in Iron Flame. But that book is bad. So maybe I shouldn't be asking for this.
I did very briefly criticize Rhiannon's portrayal as a lesbian, and I made jokes about this because it is very hard to get meaningful queer representation sometimes in romantasy books, but I have seen some people say that they felt that Rhiannon's queerness, her being sapphic, is not really a big deal in the book because it shouldn't be a big deal at all. There's a level of normalization to queer relationships, which is actually quite nice. It's positive because being queer is hopefully at some point not going to be a huge deal. We all just accept it and we just crack on, right? However, I don't think that the normalization aspect of Rhiannon's queerness within this fantasy world is particularly meaningful because her relationship doesn't feel very real at all. And I feel this way about most of the relationships outside of Violet and Xaden's relationship in this book. None of the relationships between characters feel particularly convincing because they don't really feel like real people with motives and goals and wants and dreams. So when you're doing it with queer relationships, it has the same problem in that Rhiannon's relationship with her girlfriend does not feel like any kind of representation at all because it barely feels like a relationship. To me, Rhiannon being a lesbian genuinely felt like it was just Rebecca's way of being like, yeah, we're on board with the gay agenda, babes. We're flying the rainbow flag. And I don't think that this is particularly like a targeted thing. I don't think that she did it on purpose. I just think that in general, her writing of relationships and characters outside of Xaden and Violet is very clumsy and quite poorly done in some places. I would really love to see at some point in one of these romantic books some really good queer representation. And that's not to say that you can't normalize there being queer characters in your books, but in order for that normalization to feel real and genuine and not performative, the characters themselves need to feel very substantive outside of their queerness, or even in their queerness. I don't care. Just give them a soul.
I'm going to give this book a 3.9 out of 5. I found this book funny. It's enjoyable. I enjoyed reading it. Smut's good. Character building is a bit meh. And if I have to hear that this woman is small and weak and tiny and dainty one more time, I'm deducting several points of my rating for the fact that this book is very cringy. Actually physically made me at points. Because why is her name Violence? And then like putting random swear words in between words. I'm not being funny. There are parts in this book that sound like they were written by someone who just learned what swearing was. Like, you know when like a 9-year-old learns a swear word and they just start dumping that swear word in places where it doesn't make sense for a swear word to be, but you would only know that if you'd been swearing for a long time. Yeah, that's how this book reads. And I know that sounds really demeaning to our girl Becky, and I don't mean it, babe. I'm not trying to hurt you. You write great smart, okay? Did I enjoy it to the degree where I can take the mickey out of it and it's still entertaining and still good fun, so therefore it's still good writing? Yes, indeed. However, if you are not going to make an 8-hour long recap of this book and you struggle with reading cringe, this book might not be for you. My voice is very sore because this video has taken about 13 hours to film. Half of that time is me trying to pronounce Gaelic words correctly and still failing. So please let me know in the comments down below your opinions on Fourth Wing. I'd love to hear a detailed recap of your personal thoughts. This is only my second ever booktok style video, and what I learned from the last one is that people do like to leave comments where they kind of give their opinions on the book, and that was really fun. If you don't know, I read every single one of my comments on my YouTube channel, every single one, because I'm incredibly fortunate to exist on a side of the internet where people are really nice. So if you have thoughts, feelings about this book or other books like it, or the romantasy genre in general, I'd love to hear it. There will be an Iron Flame recap in the coming weeks, but these take forever to edit, so please bear with me. After Iron Flame, I will be doing a full recap of the Akatar series by Sarah J. Maas. If you want to see my face in between those uploads, give me a little follow on Instagram. It's Eleanor L. Bateman over there. And I stream every single weekday on Twitch under the name Ellbat, same as on this YouTube channel. You can also subscribe here if you fancy. Thank you to Balessa for sponsoring this part of today's video. Remember, there's a giveaway linked in the description down below. It's free to enter, so just enter it if you want to win some goodness. Remember to hydrate, and as always, give my kisses to your mother.